Chapter 399. The fragrant scent of plants and trees refreshed everyone's spirits. However, the constant howling of beasts in the distance made everyone instinctively feel uncomfortable. Although the brownish-yellow soil with a hint of blood red seemed rather frightening, Drool had already announced that this was incredibly fertile soil. It was so fertile that all one needed to do was sprinkle seeds and nothing else, and they would be able to harvest a great harvest. In just a short few dozen hours, this place had already changed greatly. With the wood spirit's assistance, it wasn't difficult to set up a base here. In less than one night, a wall of thorns had been erected to create a living area for the humans. At the very least, this would prevent the beasts from spying on them. The simple tree houses were also able to provide shelter from the wind and rain. In the sky, the Borealis searchlights constantly scanned the entire base. The Mizar was resting and reorganizing, while the Avarice was accompanied by a frigate on an exploration mission. Meanwhile, the engineers were constructing defensive structures, and numerous goblin cannons and armored tanks were being pushed out of the airships. The most eye-catching part was probably the gigantic tower currently under construction in the center of the base. This tower's foundation was made of metal, but the large amounts of adamantine and mithril components were incredibly valuable. Even dragons would be dazzled by this tower's brilliance. The outer shell of the main tower was covered in dense magical runes. The outer shell was also covered in thick magical thorns, giving it a classical and natural appearance. There were also 4 smaller tower foundations around the main tower. The 5 towers were connected by constantly flashing magical runes. A mystical connection had already been established. 2 of the leaders, Timlad and Olivia, were personally supporting the construction of the main tower. Just this alone was enough to prove how important this tower was to the Bardi Empire. What's this? A new type of mage tower? Extracting energy from the ground? Are you intending on helping us, or settling here? Haha, take a guess. Fine. If we build a base here, won't we be in the same boat as you? At the very least, we won't allow the revived Titan giants to destroy our hard work. Indeed, judging from how many white dragons were being hunted here, there shouldn't be any powerful dragon residences nearby. And after confirming that this place was far away from the dragon's core territory, I decided to build a large-scale base here. No matter how I look at it, this doesn't seem like an outpost at all. You've always been so stingy, yet you actually invested so much into it? Do you intend to invade Dragon World? Let me say this first. There are more than 10,000 dragons here, and every lord has their own vassal group. There are also many primordial dragons and primordial dragons. Are you sure you can handle them? Copper Dragon's attitude was rather strange. She didn't give me the impression that she was worried about how the dragons would be affected, but rather that I would anger the dragons and cause them trouble. Simply speaking, her stance and attitude were both quite skewed. Ever since I first met her, I had this feeling. She was somewhat interested in the humans of Bardi, but only slightly interested. She was also rather lukewarm towards the dragons. She lived in seclusion in the human kingdoms underground as if she wasn't close to anyone, forming her own faction. Why are you worried about me? Indeed, a little. After all, you are our creator and can be considered a good friend, although you don't even remember it yourself. Looking at your ignorant face, just this point alone makes me want to beat you up. Copper Dragon was quite direct and told me about our past friendship. However, this made me feel rather conflicted. At the very least, based on the information I knew and the fact that there were no records of our relationship in the library, it seemed that our past grudges were quite complicated. I might as well pretend that I didn't hear anything about her being my ex-girlfriend, but at the very least, we had a good relationship in the past. Trust needed time to accumulate, and the feeling of being able to talk about everything required a long period of time to form. This feeling of having an old friend who knew everything, while you yourself didn't know anything at all, made me feel rather helpless. Then, can I trust you? When we have a conflict with the dragons, it's not a fundamental conflict where we have to fight to the death. It's a conflict that doesn't involve fundamental benefits. However, Evelyn suddenly chuckled. Perhaps you really should learn more about dragons. Dragons don't even have the concept of being of the same species. The number of dragons that Dragon City can control is directly related to the Dragon King's power level. The Dragon Kings are mostly responsible for the foundational matters. Every single dragon is an independent individual. I nodded. This was to be expected. After all, the dragon's internal conflicts were also the type where one would have to fight to the death. The powerful dragons and the weak humans had completely different social structures. Since it was only natural for the dragons to fight against each other, powerful individuals didn't have many natural enemies, so they didn't need to band together. Naturally, they didn't care about the benefits of the entire species. That is to say, as long as the price is high enough, the dragons themselves won't care about anything. And the oldest of us is only around 200 years old. To the dragons, that's nothing more than a long hibernation. We don't have many connections to begin with, and the only reason we're able to become elders here is because our fists are strong enough. You're asking if you can trust us? Perhaps you should ask yourself if you're able to offer us something that we're interested in. I do have quite a few good things here, but it all depends on whether or not you're willing to pay an equivalent price. But since this matter is so important, if you want to back out after I tell you, you'll kill me to keep me quiet? No, I'm a civilized person. How could I possibly do such a thing? We signed a contract beforehand that you're not allowed to reveal anything. There'll always be loopholes in this type of contract. You're not an irresolute person. If you break the contract, someone will naturally come looking for trouble with you. All right, I'll have to start from a long time ago. Around 100 years ago, I met Ale in the river Styx. And after that, our plan was carried out step by step. The most important part was that the law god ascended to godhood. Now, we're at the third step of our plan. All right, this is what we want you to do. If you break the contract, Ale will personally come looking for trouble with you. It took me more than 3 hours to explain everything clearly. The two Evelyns kept asking me questions, and they were also communicating internally. I could occasionally hear things like, "Second sister wants me to ask you. Eighth sister wants me to ask," and so on. It seemed that the Evelyns were actually able to directly communicate with each other. Their shared souls had formed a soul network that constantly resonated with each other. That's our plan. You can see that if our plan succeeds, you'll naturally receive abundant rewards. I just don't know what you're planning on doing. What I saw were several pairs of eyes that were abnormally complex. I never expected that you'd actually succeed. You're truly daring. You're basically becoming the enemy of all the current gods. You're even crazier than before. The chances of this plan succeeding are far too low. I thought that they would refuse, but I heard a third person's voice. We can understand what you're doing, and we approve of your hard work. However, we won't help you. A silver-haired Evelyn suddenly appeared in front of me. It seemed that the copper dragon was currently maintaining her projection. But we'll help you deal with some troublesome matters and mislead the dragons. Only after you prove the feasibility of this plan will we begin helping you on the surface. This was yet another projection. Her sapphire-like eyes contained a mysterious emotion. She was the original Evelyn, and as the eldest sister among the Evelyns, her words were the final decision of the other Evelyns. At the very least, we can be considered allies now. Or perhaps it's more appropriate to call us accomplices? I heaved a sigh of relief when the Evelyns all had complex expressions and agreed in unison. This was quite a big deal, after all. It would have been quite troublesome if the Evelyns had adamantly opposed my plan. However, I didn't regret telling them the truth. With their help and protection, the success rate of this plan would increase by at least 20%. My intuition and emotions kept telling me that these old friends before me were trustworthy. Although I still had a backup plan, this was indeed the best possible result. Only in novels would people immediately submit to me after making such bold claims. Without first confirming the sturdiness of this boat, who would dare to casually board it? After confirming that we were going to set up camp here, I also arranged a place for the two Evelyns to live in. Many plans were also being carried out. Did those tiger heads tell us any information about the nearby area? No, only their leader knows how to speak the dragon language. However, when he saw that we were going to set up camp here, he closed his eyes and didn't say anything. He kept looking at our interrogators with hostility, as if we were invaders. How troublesome. Right, they're half-beastmen. Can a beast tamer and drool communicate with them? I've already tried. Drool says that they're all filled with violent thoughts and refuses to communicate with them in depth. As for the beast tamer, didn't you already send out the strongest beast tamer? Even the strongest drool isn't here. Tisk, that guy still hasn't returned. No, it seems that he's met with some trouble. The strongest beast tamer? Yep, he was the existence whose name was becoming more and more unmentionable. However, there were some things that needed to be done by him. I felt that if he was here, these tiger heads would probably confess everything. Perhaps they would even fight and resolve their grudges. They would probably even form a deep friendship with someone. But now, none of them were here. Several days ago, I sent out Eaglestorm, Bayphone, Ainslow, and Diana to the Earth Elemental Plane to obtain the god equipment of wind. However, they still hadn't returned even after the scheduled departure date. It seemed that they had met with some trouble. What? Why didn't I go personally? I was too busy, so I decided to leave this legendary level quest to my underlings. I felt that their success rate was at least 90%. Perhaps they could even help me bring back an epic rank treasure chest or something. However, probability was something that was hard to say. With my luck, even if I had a 99% success rate, it was still possible that I would fail. If I didn't go, perhaps the success rate would increase. And if I did go, I would probably have some miraculous encounters. Main character treatment? Calamity Starlight bracelets count as main character treatment? That's more like a main character in a comic. Cough, cough. I seem to have accidentally exposed something again. I was no calamity, nor did I have a dangling treasure chest. Yet, I had a major failure with a 95% success rate. It seemed that I had accidentally entered something. This team has a healer, a tank, and a fighter, so it shouldn't be too difficult, right? Indeed, no matter if it's Camberin or the great stone sculptor Ainslow, neither of them are that trustworthy. Perhaps someone wants to steal the loot when they open the treasure chest. It's fine if they only want to kick someone out of the team, but I'm afraid that someone might want to kill them and steal their loot. Will your subordinates die if you don't curse them? You're such a jinx. But soon, the Air Knight and the greedy wolf airship that went on a patrol mission brought back an unexpected gift for me. That white dragon actually didn't die. That's quite an explanation. Humph. White dragons only have thick skin and thick flesh. Otherwise, they would have gone extinct long ago. Blue Dragon Evelyn didn't seem to care at all. She truly wasn't interested in the white dragon's life or death. It was just that ever since she showed her cards to me, she seemed to like hanging around me more. After I confirmed with the other copper dragons, I learned that she was indeed my liaison with the Evelyns. But to be honest, rather than the aggressive blue dragons, I wanted the copper dragons to be more sociable. At this moment, the one glaring angrily at the heavily injured white dragon was our Lord Liaison. If it was only a half-dead white dragon, it wouldn't have been a pleasant surprise. What was a pleasant surprise was that this white dragon was actually a female dragon that was about to give birth. It would seem that the Eternal Thunder Tribe's goal was dragon eggs from the very start. If they can obtain these little white dragons, their tribe's overall power level will increase by at least 10 times. And because of this, the white dragon unsurprisingly had an early miscarriage. However, it seemed that the Eternal Thunder Tribe had been aiming for quite some time. Their timing was quite good, as the pregnancy period was nearing its end. Even if the white dragon miscarried during this period, the dragon eggs would still be in relatively good condition. Of the 7 dragon eggs, at least 5 still have a chance of hatching. Originally, there were 9 eggs. Our people discovered 2 shattered shells somewhere. Who did this? Who did this so quickly? She directly swallowed this white dragon in order to recover from her injuries. All right then, it would seem that it wasn't a legend for white dragons to eat their own children. No wonder these white dragons were so disliked by their own kind. They were no different from wild beasts. No, even normal wild beasts wouldn't do such a thing. However, I was rather delighted to see the white dragon eggs before me. Dragon eggs that had just been born were rare items that couldn't even be bought on the black market, mainly because I was worried about being hunted down by adult dragons. Aren't they just some useless white dragon eggs? Why are you so happy? Could it be that you intend to tame some white dragons to become dragon knights? It'll take at least 80 years for them to be useful. Even if they become young dragons, they'll still be nothing more than wild beasts that only know how to fight. Useless? That might not be the case. Evelyn, why do you think white dragons are nothing more than wild beasts? Why? They weren't born that way. I shook my head. Although this was the mainstream way of thinking in the world, it wasn't magic at all. Many things that seemed so natural and common sense would have their own mysteries if you looked deeper into it. Actually, humans are the same. Some children are lost in the forest and raised by animals. When they grow up, they directly become so-called wolf children. They don't even need to speak. They eat raw meat and are no different from wild beasts. You're saying? Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. She had heard similar rumors before. Dragons are born powerful. They'll be able to inherit the most basic knowledge and wisdom of the previous generation while they're still in their dragon eggs. In fact, they don't even need a teacher, which is a necessary job class for other species. However, it's obvious that white dragons are different. I paused for a moment as I recalled a rumor that might be able to support my point. I've heard that silver dragons and crystal dragons will sometimes steal white dragon eggs and raise the young white dragons to take care of themselves. Is that true? Evelyn nodded. This wasn't much of a secret. Many famous white dragons in Dragon City had gotten their names this way. In that case, if we can make up for the white dragon's lack of inheritance, will we be able to create a species that's no weaker than other species of dragons? I'm quite skilled when it comes to memories and souls. In terms of physical strength, white dragons aren't bad. Their element is also my favorite ice element. It's worth a try. Do you have time? Their growth is astonishingly slow. Haha, I naturally have a plan. Right? If my experiment is successful, can you help me obtain some white dragon eggs? It's impossible to sell or raise them. If you can prove that you can really make white dragons more like dragons, you should be able to discuss this with the other elders. That's good enough. Let's try it. Chapter 400. You're hopeless. Remember to buy a good grave first, in case you don't have a place to bury yourself after you die. Sometimes when a doctor told you this, it wasn't that you were hopeless, it was that they were saying, if you want to live, don't be stingy with your medical fees. And if you were truly hopeless, the doctor probably wouldn't say anything in front of you. The doctor would either inform your family or try to shirk responsibility. During negotiations, they used similar techniques a lot. First, I would make the problem sound as serious as possible and raise it high. If you were scared, then I would naturally accept all sorts of conditions that were similar to blackmail. I was used to using such techniques in negotiations in the past, but this time I didn't lie. This dimension's collapse is unstoppable, since the Titans have already awakened, and even their incarnations are moving about freely in the outside world. It's almost impossible to make them fall back into slumber. That's right. If someone had already awakened from slumber and was ready to get up, was there any way to make them fall back asleep? Although I didn't know who had placed the seal on the Titans, it had to be at least on the level of the goddess of order or chaos to be able to seal away an entire species in a perfectly balanced dimension. And now, there was a flaw in the perfect seal that the Titans had placed. It would be incredibly difficult to fix. The seal in the past was like an intricate door lock created by a master craftsman. Now that part of the lock is broken. If you want to fix the lock, you'll need to first understand the lock structure, and it'll be best if you have a blueprint for the lock. Then you can take it off and fix it. Of course, the simplest way is to just add a lock to the side. According to this line of thought, if I wanted to fix the seal, I would first have to undo the seal, but that would be the end of this world. And the so-called simplest way to deal with the Titans was to simply add a new seal on the surface of the seal. That would be meaningless. Since the Titans were able to shatter the old seal, a new seal would be even easier. That was why even though the dragons had racked their brains and searched through all the ancient records, they still couldn't find a solution. Actually, they didn't have much hope in coming to ask a human mage for help. But in a situation like this, I directly said that I couldn't do it. This was basically saying, even though you invited me here, you're still hopeless. The person I invited couldn't help me, yet he was still smiling proudly and speaking as if it was only natural. Horace was rendered speechless for a long while before he managed to say something. You are very sincere. Of course, honesty is a virtue, but telling lies that can be seen through is not morality, but pure stupidity. Indeed, lies could be highly beneficial in certain situations. However, based on my experience with Little Red and I, it would be foolish to lie when dealing with dragons, especially older ones. Apart from the fact that dragons loved to cast lie detection and truth detection spells on themselves, the worst part was that these large lizards who relied on their instincts would often have astonishing intuition. They would be able to use their intuition alone to determine if someone was being kind or lying. But if there's really no other way, there's no need for me to come. I swirled the glass. Through the bright red of blood, the scene in front of me was like a dream. Although they will awaken and this space is destined to collapse, it's not like there's no other way. We can completely delay the time it takes for them to awaken, and there's even a way to stop the collapse. Of course, to do that, the price we have to pay is not small. After I finish my discussion with Horace, or perhaps I should say that I finished tricking him, the welcoming party naturally came to an end. However, it was already late at night outside. I didn't follow Horace's invitation to stay at the location that Dragon City had arranged for me. Instead, I chose to return to the Borealis, which was parked outside the city, and wait for tomorrow morning for a formal discussion. After all, sometimes it was better to be more careful, especially when you had all sorts of valuable treasures on you, and you just happened to enter a group of professional bandits. Professional bandits? Mises, Little Red, will probably be quite displeased if she finds out that you're belittling dragons like this. No, if she really finds out, she'll only proudly praise me. After all, she's the female dragon who wrote a manual on why to rob others. In her mind, robbing is also a skill, and she herself is a master of this skill. As I strolled through the streets of the Dragon City, I admired the priceless jade buildings as I spoke ill of the dragon race. You don't say. They were like this back in the day as well. They basically viewed robbing as a normal job. Not only did the color dragons have no qualms about robbing others, even the metal dragons often did similar things. However, they would often use the excuse that they were fighting against evil. But in the end, all the wealth of those villains would vanish without a trace. That's because they've been the strongest individual in the mortal plane for such a long period of time. Nobody would care if they did bad things, so it's only natural that they would lose control of their violence. It's just like how naughty brats with no one to teach them how to be tyrannical. It's quite normal for them to treat other people's belongings as their own. As Harloise and I walked down the street, not only did we constantly attract the attention of bystanders, we also attracted many followers. However, as we walked, these followers would gradually disappear. The previous incident had already made us into a moving bomb in the eyes of the dragons. In order to prevent us from causing trouble, there were naturally people secretly following us and chasing away uninvited guests. Even though we clearly knew that there were people secretly following us, we still fearlessly badmouthed the dragons. In fact, we even intentionally spoke louder. Are we going back now? Of course not. It's rare for us to be here, so I want to take a look at Dragon City's night scenery. You're going to parade around with a bunch of tails? Do you really like being treated like a monkey show? Of course not. That's why we should change our clothes. We randomly found a random corner and wandered in. Suddenly, a series of traffic accidents occurred behind us, and when we reappeared, we were no longer the same two people as before. Red full-body armor and a gigantic heavy sword on one's back, along with a powerful aura of a dragon bloodline, were quite common in this city. Due to certain reasons, warriors who intentionally hid their faces from others were now the norm. After all, the awakening of a dragon bloodline would bring them power, and they would be considered lucky if they could still maintain an acceptable physical appearance. Pure-blooded dragons would also judge others based on their appearance, and it wouldn't feel good to be treated as a bastard. As for the most commonly seen detection magic, I was immune to it from the very start. When I brushed past the panicked follower, the heavy sword transformed back into the black cat that leaped onto my shoulder. She lazily rolled around and scratched her cat whiskers, as if this was the most comfortable position for her. Where are we going? Are we going to rob the dragon's treasure trove? Or are we going to steal some more dragon eggs? I'm not a dragon, and I don't have such hobbies. Besides, if we cause any more trouble, won't everyone know that we did it? Let's go see what the dragons are hiding. What they're hiding? Yep. Haven't you noticed that this city is far too peaceful? You're talking about the giants? I nodded. Halen's impression of the giants and dragons was that they were fighting each other. I doubted that the dragons would be able to defeat all those troublesome giants in such a short period of time. And even if the dragons won, they would definitely suffer tremendous losses. I wanted to learn more about the giants' actual combat strength. And it would be even better if I had a battle report from the dragons and dragons. Why don't you let the dragons lead the way? No matter what, we're all allies now. Would you let your allies see how weak you are? That's true. But unfortunately, even though we did our best to search for them, we still couldn't find any traces of injured dragons, even though we followed the paths of healing and drinking water to search for them. Even the dragons would need large amounts of food, water, and medicine to recover after being injured. It would seem that the dragons really aren't here. Then where would they be? The front lines? Don't tell me there's another dragon city? Hey, why are you thinking about it so seriously? I'm just saying it casually. No, it might actually be possible. I don't think that the dragons would so easily reveal their true location. Our two envoys chatted as we walked. We would also occasionally look at the roadside stalls and try to pick up some rare treasures. What? We weren't doing our jobs anymore. We were doing our jobs. Weren't all diplomats supposed to be spies? Look at us. We were still trying to gather information about the dragon citizens. How could we be so professional? It seems like you're thinking about something really rude. Not all diplomats are spies or scouts. They're the ones responsible for maintaining the relationship between two countries. They have such a hard time. Yep. They have to do their best to test the color of the dragon's underwear, and then they have to incite the dragon citizens to go out on the streets. Finally, they even have to do their best to support the dragon's opposition. What a tough job. Although we still didn't gain much, chatting improved our moods quite a bit. To be honest, if the situation allowed for it, I'd really like to make a trade with the dragons. After all, every dragon is a treasure trove. So many resources accumulated together would be nothing to scoff at. How are we supposed to trade? It's not like the dragons lack anything. They lack plenty of things. Haven't you noticed how simple life in Dragon City is? They don't even have casinos, brothels, or bars like normal cities do. And even if they lack nothing, can't we just create consumption? Eating, drinking, and pooping won't earn us any money. You're saying? Don't be fooled by Little Red's playful appearance. She actually cares a lot about her scales. Every once in a while, she'll go take a volcano bath, and she'll regularly polish her nails. It's said that if she doesn't take care of her nails for a long time, her combat strength will decrease. I wasn't making this up. A human's nails would be dry and cracked, which would probably make them look ugly. However, if a dragon's nails broke when they clawed, it would probably make their enemies laugh their heads off. Volcano baths were rich in minerals and fire elements, which would make a red dragon's scales even more energetic and sturdy. This was also a necessary way to increase a dragon's defensive abilities. Of course, after taking a volcano bath, her scales would glow for a period of time. This was one of the reasons why red dragons and silver dragons always fought over volcanoes. It was said that silver dragons were the dragons who loved beauty the most. See, it's so troublesome for those mothers to take care of their babies. They can transform into human form, but their babies are even bigger than they are, and they're difficult to take care of. We could provide them with a pet storage service so that they can happily go out on the streets. Yep, we can even sell them collars so that they can tie up their babies and walk around. Why does it sound like a human pet shop? Cough, don't mind such a small matter. Besides, apart from those traditional services, we can also do beauty and nail salons here. Just look at how monotonous their wings are. They're either red or blue. There's only one color. We can also provide tattoo services, such as embroidery of a tiger or a lion. Let's not talk about how awkward it would be to embroider a tiger's head on a dragon's body. One wing of a dragon is red and the other is white. Would that be considered a red dragon or a white dragon? Yep. Harloise, you're such a genius. You reminded me. This is such a great idea. We can also provide services to transform into other dragons. For example, if you're bored of being a black dragon, you can paint a layer of gold on your body and disguise your dragon head and wings, pretending to be a gold dragon. This will be much more convenient for robbing others, who would want to always be on guard against a righteous gold dragon. Don't tell me. I think that if you really do this, you'll probably be hunted down by all dragons, especially the gold dragons. Right, you? Chatting was probably the best way to relax. To be honest, Dragon City gave me quite a bit of pressure. After all, anyone would tremble at the sight of so many saint-ranked, legend-ranked, and above combat strength on the streets. Not to mention, I had to entertain all the dragon elders at the banquet. Even the weakest dragon would be an immemorial dragon that would be no weaker than any ordinary myth-ranked individual. As for the strongest, there were at least 5 of them that I couldn't even see through. A conservative estimate would be that they were all far stronger than I was at my peak. The dragons are truly blessed by the heavens. These gold bloodlines are so easy to obtain. As long as they reach adulthood, they'll be at least at the gold rank. With just a bit of training, they'll be able to easily crush ordinary legend-ranked individuals. Meanwhile, humans will only be able to reach the peak of silver even if they train for an entire lifetime. Right, since they're so powerful, they must have had quite a good life in the game's history. However, I directly shook my head. They're basically the same as mages. For the first half of the game, they were all useless teammates who were sleepwalking. They thought that they'd be able to stay out of the battle, but by the time they noticed that the situation was off and joined the battle was already about to collapse. Just like the Cloud Tower, only now did I recall that I hadn't told Harloise about the mage country's terrible performance in the game's history. Yep, actually it's the same thing. They're both overly confident in their own power, so they're used to watching the outside world change. They think that everything is just a temporary storm, and when they discover that they've fallen into a deep swamp and are unable to escape, it'll be difficult for them to rise up again. Didn't you notice that whenever I talked about the Holy War, that Horus guy would either feign ignorance and smile foolishly while stroking his beard, or he would change the topic? It's obvious that the dragons still intend to stay out of the battle. What happened to the dragons in the game's history? Nothing much. It's just that the tallest trees always attract the most attention. The dragons were transformed into bone dragon armies by the undead, slaughtered by evil gods, parasitized by insects, cooked and eaten by the giants. In the end, even the human empire's battleships had to avoid the scattered dragons. Of course, the dragons still joined the allied armies later on, but they suffered tremendous losses. Some of their branches even went completely extinct. Oh, so you're a prophet as well? Are the dragons so pitiful in the future? Could you tell me in detail? What astonished me the most was that the person who had interrupted my conversation with Harloise through a mental link was right behind me. I suddenly turned around and discovered that it was a seemingly young snow elf. He was short and not even as tall as my lover, and his apple-like face was incredibly cute. How is this possible? How could a conversation through a mental link possibly be eavesdropped on? I had an expression of astonishment as I clenched the white rose in my sleeve. My expression was still pale with fright, but I was seriously considering what information I could divulge, as well as the possibility of silencing Harloise in Dragon City. Youngsters these days are truly frightening. They're always thinking about silencing others. Relax, youngster. I've come with good intentions. Please put away that white rose of yours. I'm old and can't take any fright. The snow elf, who looked like a young boy, spoke in a mature manner. It was obvious that he was an old demon. His seemingly pure silver-white eyes had actually seen through everything. My name has long since been forgotten by the world. You can call me Sam, the supreme immemorial white dragon. Now that I think about it, I'm a great-grandfather of the white dragon you killed earlier. By the way, how much do you charge for coloring a white dragon into a gold dragon? Can I owe you? I'm quite poor. Chapter 4:01. Debt? Sorry, I can do that for other species, but don't even think about dragons. I've been dealing with dragons for quite some time now. If they say that they owe me a debt, that means they don't intend to pay me back. They're basically on the same level as elementary school bullies. He unhesitatingly said such malicious words. But borrowing money without returning it, stealing a child's toy, wasn't this just like a school bully? Isn't this racism? You're discriminating against dragons in Dragon City. Do you want to die a pitiful death? I think that dragons are indeed worthy of discrimination when it comes to honesty. Have you ever borrowed money from other dragons in the past? Although he said such inappropriate words, his heart was pounding like a drum. Why is this old monster looking for me? Although white dragons are despised by dragons, they were still pigs. It was already ridiculous for a white dragon to have the title of Supreme Immemorial Dragon. Not to mention, he was still a dragon's. Supreme Immemorial Dragons were the most ancient existences among all dragons. There was no limit to their strength, so it was difficult to estimate just how strong they were. Since he was a Supreme Immemorial Dragon, he was likely a powerful individual who had survived the ancient god wars. Existences who lived for tens of thousands of years were doubtlessly the strongest of all dragons. Naturally, they were also the strongest in the world. Any white dragon that appeared in the world would be ranked in the top 10 of the calamity rankings. He was far from someone that a youngster like me with only 300 years of experience could deal with. Such existences had long since surpassed Dragon City's control. After experiencing endless wars in time, most white dragons didn't care much about power and status. No matter what species of dragon they would usually live in seclusion. It was quite incomprehensible for him to suddenly come looking for me. Actually, I originally wanted to do business with you, but since I met a true great prophet, I naturally want to know more. I hated these old fellows the most. They had so many random abilities. How was I supposed to deal with them if they saw through me so easily? Didn't they know that scammers were professional scammers? How was I supposed to scam them if they saw through me? Asterisk snap. Asterisk with a snap of my fingers. The blood dragon armor that covered me disappeared without a trace. Wumian's mage robe had the ability to block detection, so I refused to believe that it would be able to pass through my god equipment's protection. As expected, at this moment, the fake Shota frowned. Maybe we need to find a place to talk. I personally came with good intentions. In that case, what kind of kindness would make a supreme, primordial dragon come looking for me? The white dragon's inheritance. I was bewildered. I didn't expect that the matter I had casually created would attract such an old monster. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. Allowing the white dragons to stand on the same starting line as the other dragons seemed like nothing more than a non-core technology for us. However, for the white dragons, this was a critical technology that would change the fate of their entire species. It was no wonder that such an ancient existence would appear. Thus I smiled. What I was afraid of was that you would come up and fight me. If I couldn't defeat you, I could only run away. But since you have a request, everything is fine. Perhaps we could talk about cooperation and trade. By the way, I can show you the samples first. A group of white dragon whelps that can already transform. They came out of the dragon eggs less than a month ago. After obtaining the Frigid Winterlands world, I felt like I finally received some main character treatment. Other main characters only have a random treasure or a portable old man, but I have an entire world with me. The current Frigid Winterlands was no longer the desolate ice plains of the past. When I first entered this world, even the old white dragon was astonished. In a naturally formed valley basin, the temperature had been raised by humans. Now, there was a city called Permafrost Town. Permafrost Town was our theoretical laboratory base. Large numbers of researchers were stationed here to work on their own research projects. Asterisk snap. Asterisk with a light snap of my fingers, I arrived at my personal residence. Everyone sat in their own chairs. Although the fake Shota's expression remained calm, his widened eyes revealed his astonishment. Of course, I wouldn't show off for no reason. Even if the fake Shota seemed friendly, I needed to be careful when considering his identity as a white dragon. Showing off my power would also increase the price and safety of the trade, so why not? Leak information about Frigid Winterlands? Actually, not only had I already leaked this information after fighting against Zero, the world had changed. Soon, there would no longer be need to keep this secret. A steaming hot cup of tea appeared on the table. No matter how long the white dragons had lived, it was impossible for them to have seen something that was almost like the Creator's power. This should be able to prove some of my abilities. I just contacted them. The little white dragons are still in kindergarten. School will end in another 2 hours. Let's chat first and then go take a look. Places with people would naturally have schools. It wasn't my idea to have the little white dragons go to school. The researchers here were quite interested in the dragons who were born with knowledge. In fact, some of them even intended to raise some of their own researchers. As for whether or not there was a Shota or a lowly training plan, cough, cough. Let's not think too deeply about it for now. However, the researchers here indeed seemed to treat the smart little white dragons as treasures. I had even visited the kindergarten. It was completely closed off, and every child had 3 teachers, one for alchemy, one for engineering, and one for literature. How was I supposed to deal with the fact that there were more teachers than there were children? These guys were addicted to teaching, which was slowing down the research progress. This was how I explained the little white dragon's problem. However, the old white dragon's focus was no longer on the little white dragons. As expected of the Order faction's great profit in this holy war. This is a completely real world. Is this the authority of the Creator Goddess? Out of all the great prophets in history, you're probably one of the top 3. The old white dragon drank his tea and felt the warmth in his throat. He was now certain that this wasn't some sort of fantasy or soul world. He instantly raised his opinion of Roland even higher. Originally, the old white dragon had only viewed Roland as a junior who had made some achievements. His ability to truly be a prophet increased his opinion of Roland. But now, in this completely real world, the old white dragon now viewed Roland as an existence on the same level as himself. Don't underestimate this existence on the same level. 4 supreme immemorial dragons. They only needed to maintain the most basic level of respect for even a true god. It was unknown who would die if they went all out. Dragons would never have the habit of worshipping the weak. As they watched the gods change, they even looked down on the unlucky ones who were bound by their own rules. It seemed that only supreme immemorial dragons and immemorial dragons viewed the gods as nothing more than sacrifices and consumables for the world. Not only that, they had always stayed out of the holy war, which made them view all other species as nothing more than ants. Perhaps you would be able to have a good conversation with such an existence if you met him by chance, but he would actually look down on you. It was just like how a human would look down on a harmless little animal. When they were happy, they would play with the animal, but if they accidentally angered the animal or decided to take it out on the animal, it was possible that they would die a horrible death. Actually, dragons weren't the only ones who had this problem. Many ancient gods and golden bloodlines had this problem as well. It was just that dragons had a particularly obvious symptom of growing the corners of their eyes. The only way to cure this problem was to beat them until they were convinced. This is an illness that needs to be cured. First, beat them until they're half dead. This was how I dealt with the black dragons and red dragons who had joined Donlon, but were still acting all high and mighty. It was quite effective, but right now I was rather astonished. Why would prophecies have anything to do with the Order faction? The Order faction's great prophet? Does this have anything to do with the Order faction? Isn't prophecy supposed to be a separate magic system? It was rare to meet such a powerful person, and the dragons didn't seem to be tight-lipped either. Of course, this is only the ultimate power of the Order faction. Order has its own rules, and the highest level of rules are nothing more than space and time. Prophecy abilities seem to have no rules at all, but they're actually the materialization of the rules of space and time. Being able to obtain more information than your enemies is the foundational reason why the Order faction's overall combat strength is always greater than the Chaos faction's. Fate is the same. Otherwise, why would the god of fate be in the Order faction? Alright then, this was a secret that completely messed up my knowledge system. In the past, I had always treated prophecy magic as a separate type. But when I thought about it carefully, it was quite possible and logical. But if I really tried to investigate the past, some things would be terrifying. I shook my head and tossed all this nonsense to the back of my mind. I would deal with these things later. I should first deal with the problem before me. Do you have any hopes for the dragon's future? Since you've already heard my prophecy, do you have any plans? Perhaps you short-lived species have too short a lifespan and don't have many memories, but I've personally met quite a few great prophets. The old dragon was quite relaxed as he quietly sipped on his tea. He could tell that this was Moyer crystal tea, a special product of the wind elemental plane. If it wasn't for the fact that this plane was so special, it would have been impossible for it to exist in a mortal plane. His relaxed manner seemed to indicate that he wasn't really worried about the Armageddon in his prophecy. I carefully observed him and discovered that he really didn't seem to care. Those prophets are used to making things sound so serious and thinking about it so seriously. But for prophecies, the moment that the prophecy is made, the future will change. And only prophecies of misfortune are meaningful. After all, calamities will make people wary, while future success and luck will make people lose their will to fight, ultimately changing their fate. But as you can see, no matter what kind of prophecy it is, everything will change after it's made. Nonsense, we of the mist. If the white dragon's prophecy was true, then what was with the prophecy of our destruction? Oh, right? Are you the last descendant of the Mist Kingdom? Did you prophesize that your kingdom would be destroyed? I know some things, but it would seem that your kingdom's destruction was mostly because you were too weak. Before I even finished speaking, countless sharp swords of ice descended upon me. The white flames burning within these swords caused Sam to instinctively feel fear. This was a trump card that could threaten me. I once again raised my opinion of this young man in my mind, but I still had a smile on my face. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath as I looked at the calm, elderly man. I used too much force in my hand and accidentally crushed the cup in my hand. The headache helped me regain my sense of reason. My sense of reason told me that Sam was correct. However, the anger in my heart kept accumulating. I was quite displeased to be evaluated in such a way, and when I thought about the warriors who fought against misfortune until the very last moment, I felt quite displeased. Indeed, perhaps we humans are still quite weak compared to you dragons, but at this moment, my words were filled with anger, but I was suddenly interrupted. You've misunderstood. How could I possibly be so shallow as to evaluate strength and weakness? I'm talking about the difference between your power to change fate and the power that allowed history to develop normally. Besides, the destruction of the Mist Kingdom back in the day was actually something that far surpassed what mortals could handle. This time, it was my turn to be astonished. Wasn't it all because of the masterminds behind the scenes? If they weren't mortals, then what were they? We're both ice dragons, and I have a good relationship with the Dragon of End. Excelsius. Dragon of End? How could I possibly forget such a Chinibia nickname? Wasn't that the king of Frigid Maw from the Great Snow Mountain? He treated me quite well, and I learned all of my foundational magic from him. Back in the day, when the Mist Kingdom was destroyed, the Great Snow Mountain was cut off from the entire mortal plane. All of the Frigid Maw were trapped in the Snow Mountain. It's likely that there are no more than 10 people in the entire universe who are capable of cutting off and sealing off an entire plane without any side effects. To be honest, I felt that it was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife, but now that I see you, I can understand. The next instant, the entire mortal plane began to violently tremble. Glaciers began to extend from the ground, and the sky was filled with thunder and lightning. The entire world began to furiously distort. I couldn't hear what else the elderly dragon said, but there was only one sentence that kept repeating in my heart. There was actually a mastermind behind the scenes back in the day. The true culprit hasn't been judged yet. Our enemies are still at large. Chapter 402. Let's not mention the trouble that Beifeng had caused for the time being, since he was nothing more than a blind fool. After everyone else left, I left behind the person that I had truly sent to carry out this mission. After all, some things were better if fewer people knew about them. It would be much more fun if schemes were exposed to the public. The great stone sculptor's attempt to ascend to godhood failed? Well done. I nodded after hearing Beifeng's explanation. Actually, this was the true goal of my treasure hunting team, which was to make a certain someone lose the possibility of ascending to the Earth Elemental God's throne. In normal situations, repairing the Earth Elemental throne would require a large amount of God equipment materials and time. If left alone, it would probably repair itself in several tens of thousands of years. But if one wanted to speed up the repair process, they would need to spend money and materials. The more they spent, the faster the repair process would be. Why does it feel like this is a Chinese scam MMORPG? Fortunately, I'm not one of the players fated to be scammed to death. I'm the mastermind behind the scenes. Originally, I didn't intend to care about the Earth Elemental throne. After all, this pit was far too deep. It would be fine to just let it repair itself over time. But even though I didn't intend to help this bottomless pit, someone else was far more anxious than I was. After all, I wasn't the only one anxious when the Earth Elemental Throne's repair time was tied to the stability of the Dragon World seal. Since there's a sucker paying the bill, I can participate. All I needed to do was act as a middleman and bring the mage country and dragons' people to the scene to see the situation. Then, under the astonished gazes of the two major clients, I would make a long list of resources needed to repair the Earth Elemental Throne and wait for the two major clients to prepare all the resources. As for whether or not there was any embezzlement, would you believe me if I told you that I didn't leave anything behind? Of course, I also made some contributions in order to show my international spirit of sharing wealth and suffering together. For example, I handed over more than half of the Earth Elemental Throne's shards that Beifeng had collected. I also gave away the remaining shards that I had digested in the frigid winter earth. The Earth Elemental Lords, led by Ainslow, were the ones who helped the Elemental Throne's restoration go extremely smoothly. After the Elemental Civil War came to an end, the Earth Elemental Lords actually reached a consensus on the surface and looked forward to the swift birth of an elemental god. I didn't know what conditions Ainslow had promised me, or how she had convinced the Earth Elemental Lords, who were difficult to communicate with, to support her ascension to the throne. However, the end result was that all the Earth Elemental Lords opened up their own treasure vaults and paid up all sorts of divine Earth Elemental items without caring about the cost. The quantitative change finally became a qualitative change. 10 days ago, an elemental pillar of light began to form. The Earth Elemental tide in every plane is rapidly decreasing. It would seem that the Elemental Throne is about to form. The Elemental Throne's restoration went quite smoothly thanks to all the Earth Elemental Lord's investments. However, this Elemental Throne that had been formed so quickly was obviously inferior to the original version that had taken tens of thousands of years to form. Anyone who ascended to the throne with this Elemental Throne would likely become the weakest elemental god for a long time. Considering how Unbroken was still so strong despite being heavily injured to the point of death, the weakest elemental god in the Earth Elemental Plane wouldn't be any weaker than a powerful god. That's why, don't let Ainslow succeed in her ascension. Even if there must be an elemental god, the dumber and weaker the elemental god's ascension will be more in line with my expectations. This was a secret order that only I knew about. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, I didn't even personally go to the Earth Elemental Plane. I didn't want the others to ignore me and make me take the blame if something happened, although I was indeed the one who should take the blame. For some reason, I kept feeling like my reputation was becoming more and more devilish. It's all the devil's Roland's fault. As for why I couldn't let the great stone sculptor ascend to the throne, wasn't she supposed to be my ally? Actually, although I had signed all sorts of contracts with her, I could sense her astonishing ambition and influence all the more. As the Stone Mother, she had previously been the leader of the Omdorokan Alliance. Many of her descendants were powerful elemental lords. She had left the elemental planes not to avoid the dangers of a new elemental war, but rather because no matter how the elemental war ended, she would always be the final victor. This was just like how she had been the most proactive in attacking Omdorokan. That was because if the elemental lord had fallen, it would naturally be her turn to ascend to the throne as the elemental lord for eternity. Her true reason for coming to the mortal plane was to gather information about the other planes. In fact, she even wanted to gather information about me, the person who had defeated Omdoroken. This wasn't something that an elemental lord who was only limited to the elemental planes would need to know. Doubtlessly, her goal definitely wasn't the earth elemental plane. As for her relationship with a certain someone, at the very least, after that certain someone discovered her ambition and true nature, this relationship became nothing more than an act. Later on, when I discovered that she had some faint connection to the lower planes, her so-called contract became an unreliable restriction. If the great stone sculptor truly ascended to the throne, this ambitious stone mother would likely become a new source of trouble. I don't care who you choose to ascend to the throne. Even if it's a rock or an insect, they'll still be stronger than her. As for the person who would carry out the secret order, only a certain someone who was becoming more and more mystical would be able to take on such a heavy responsibility. But judging from the current situation, not only had he accomplished this, he hadn't been discovered by anyone involved. In fact, the great stone sculptor even viewed him as a trustworthy ally. How'd you do it? After that elemental throne is formed, it should automatically choose the most suitable elemental lord to ascend to become an elemental god. How'd you twist this rule? The elemental throne was an inanimate object, after all. It was the incarnation of the dimensional will. However, it would only choose the strongest earth elemental creature within its range to wear the crown. Of course, the prerequisite was that the earth elemental creature was willing to ascend to the throne. However, it was impossible for inanimate objects to measure soft conditions like technology and knowledge. I reckoned that it would most likely look for a domain lord with the highest quantity and quality of earth element. Beifeng Heralt still had a simple and honest smile on his face. I really didn't expect that he was the one who screwed over his lover. One of them. Speaking of which, if we were to count the number of lovers he had, this guy should have long since become the public enemy of all men, the target of the FFF group's god's execution. However, not a single person envied him for his main character aura and luck with women. What I'm doing is simply to have an existence in the mortal plane that's more suitable than her to become an elemental god. For example, a certain domain lord who wields the god equipment of earth. I was rather astonished. I was the only one who knew about the existence of the god equipment of earth. How did Beifeng manage to obtain it? It's already good enough that your companions don't beat you up. Do you think they'll listen to your orders and work for you? Earth elemental artifact? Wasn't it in the wind elemental plane? Oh, I understand now, Camderon. Beifeng nodded with a proud expression. This time, even he felt that he had done a wonderful job. He had accomplished such a great thing just by moving his lips. Some things were better understood than needed. There was no need to reveal everything. As the wind elemental god was the earth elemental god's enemy, Camderon naturally didn't want to see a new mortal enemy even more dangerous than Omdoroken appear. And since his second goal in this trip was to obtain the god equipment of wind, it was only natural that he would bring his companions to the wind elemental plane to obtain the god equipment of earth in exchange for it. Not to mention, he would also be able to screw over the great stone sculptor. So, when the elemental throne chose a new elemental god, the god equipment of earth was one of the targets you chose, but the great stone sculptor simply missed out on the elemental throne. Right? Who did you choose? An elemental lord with the highest amount of earth element in the world. Not only that, he was the least threatening target. I was rather astonished by Beifeng's words. Who? Little Sand. Who's that? I've never heard of an elemental lord with that name before. Didn't you say that both bugs and rocks are fine? Your wish is my command. You've seen Little Sand before. He's the one that ate the most elemental thrones. Sandworm, you really dared to do it. Indeed, there was nothing more suitable for my goal than sandworms. They were pure creatures of the earth elemental plane. They would never consider leaving the plane, and they didn't have much intelligence, so they were of no threat at all. How'd you do it? Little Sand had already devoured a large number of elemental throne shards, and he also devoured the god equipment of earth. Along with his mountainous body, the sandworm had an astonishing amount of earth element. And so, Little Sand was chosen. You don't know how much despair the other elemental lords felt when Little Sand suddenly crawled out of the ground, and the elemental throne directly chose him. Nobody suspected that you were the one who did it? Of course. I've always been careful. The Sandworm King itself already has an astonishing amount of earth element. Then, I told them that the elemental throne had been devoured by him. Most people thought that it was just a coincidence. You did a good job this time. Originally, if your lover became the earth elemental god, you should have at least received some benefits. I'll find a chance to compensate you for your losses. It's fine. Little Sand is still my lover. All right, then. I did my best to suppress the urge to toss him into a goblin cannon and shoot him into the sky as I looked at his brilliant and honest smile. You did a good job. Rest for a few days. I have other tasks for you. Right. Why did you all come back so late? Everyone else is blaming you. Didn't you reveal your mission objective? No. At least Little Sand came to celebrate with me. He wanted a nest of his own god children, and I had to comfort the pitiful Ainslow. In the end, everyone ended up playing together, so we wasted some time. Godchildren? Playing together? All right, then. I really shouldn't have asked, nor should I have imagined things. It seemed that the Earth Elemental Plane, the source of all planes, would become Bafing's nest. Many of Bafing's descendants would occupy an entire world. Just thinking about it made me feel more and more afraid, and I made up my mind to never go to the Earth Elemental Plane again. And so, I angrily roared with a serious expression. I'll give you a good task right now. Go to the Eternal Thunder Tribe here and become a Goodwill Ambassador. Yep, they're your favorite beast heads. You can play with them however you want, as long as you stay away from me. Chapter 4:03. Perhaps nobody expected that Roland's expeditionary army would act as if they were living in peace and contentment after arriving in Dragon World. They built houses and farmed. They built walls that were more than 10 meters tall, and metal barracks were connected together. They even built mage towers and biological laboratories. It was obvious that they were going to live here for a long time. As for the dragon's promise, didn't we agree to delay the Titan giants from breaking the Earth Elemental God seal? Now that I've revived the Earth Elemental God, the elemental tide in Dragon World is beginning to balance out. Didn't that already happen? I haven't asked for payment from you yet. As for completely sealing the Earth Elemental God, do you really think that the Titan giants will obediently let us strengthen the seal? You should at least give us the ability to protect ourselves. Not to mention the Titan giants, even the running giants can easily kill us. I had originally intended to wait for the dragon's messengers to arrive and deal with them. As for whether they believed me or not, I didn't care if they believed me or not. This world didn't belong to them to begin with, so why would they care? All right, I did have some bastardly logic, but sometimes this kind of bastardly logic was more effective. The dragons were the typical example of those with bigger fists being the boss. You're overthinking things. The dragons wouldn't care if you build a house here. They wouldn't care if short-lived species like you exist or not. And even if they were bored enough to care, with a normal dragon's concept of time, they'd only remember after sleeping for 300 years. Besides, Evelyn's words had some hidden meaning. That's not so ridiculous, is it? Besides what? Besides, our fourth sister is doing her best to cover up for you. In their eyes, you're working hard to balance out the elemental seal. So why would they come looking for you? Right, since you've already done part of it, you can ask for payment now. All right then, this was what true allies should be like. Even if you didn't mention it, they would still think about your benefits. But 1 week later, another dragon descended from the sky. When I looked closely, I saw an old acquaintance on the dragon's back. Isn't this my good friend from the same school as me, Cade? Why did you come looking for me? Could it be? Haha, I can't believe you still remember your mission. It's that could it be? Cade stroked his beard, taking advantage of his old age. His snow-white beard was so fluffy from washing that it seemed as if he really wanted to pull it out. You didn't come all the way to another world just to return the money, right? You're such a good person. I'm not here to pay you back. Oh no, I don't even owe you money. You played this joke long enough. Are you still not tired of it? My disciples are all guessing how much money I owe you. Why are you always rushing me? Besides, you were the one who owed me money back then. TSK, you actually remembered. Ah, you did it on purpose. To think that I spent a large sum of money to hire an illusionist to perform a memory recall on you. Pfft, you really did it. It must feel good to have someone fiddle with your head, right? Apparently, the ninth ring arcana technique memory recall not only expends a large amount of energy, but can also cause a person's mind to split. Are you still that snot-nosed brat? I think I remembered wrong. Bedwetting kid? Snot. Bedwetting? This old man will fight it out with you. From a certain standpoint, it was quite amusing to make the white-bearded old man so angry, especially when he was clearly younger than me, but always took advantage of his age. If I didn't teach him a lesson, wouldn't that make me seem even less energetic and older than him? I'm still young. Tell me, Kate, what business do you have with me? If you want to borrow money, don't mention it. Talking about money will hurt my feelings. Huff, huff. The furious old man's veins were bulging on his forehead. After using a staff technique that even a fly wouldn't be able to kill, the old man could only lower his head and take deep breaths, using his staff as a walking stick. Why bother? First of all, I'm clearly at the warrior level, yet you, a mage, still want to fight me in melee combat. If you die just like that, I'll feel guilty. Yep, I'll feel guilty for about a minute. The old man took out a dark green potion from his robes and drank it in one gulp. He rubbed his chest for quite a while before staring at me. Do you really want to kill me that badly? Forget it. You've always been like this. No wonder everyone says that I shouldn't bicker with you. Let's talk about business first. You should know why I came here, right? I reached out with my index finger, picked my nose, and then lightly flicked it. I don't know. Are you still holding a grudge against me? Can you be a little more mature? Didn't you say that I'm a pervert who likes little girls? Why would I tell everyone about how you proposed to Amelia on the street? Wasn't what I said the truth? Do you think I don't know what you said? You clearly said that Amelia was in a coma due to some accident, and that she was still thinking about me while she was unconscious. Yet, I disregarded everything and came to the Cloud Tower to enjoy myself. As a result, all the female students who call me teacher all looked at me as if I were an ingrate the next day. That bit of luck I had with women was all gone. So you're still holding a grudge against me? Are you a child? You're already so old, yet you're still pretending to be young. You're already like this, yet you still dare to complain about having no luck with women in front of this old virgin. You're too shameless. Judging from the veins on Cade's forehead, if I continued teasing him, he would probably die from a brain hemorrhage. That was why I restrained myself slightly in our subsequent interactions. Actually, how can I not know why he came here? I knew from the moment I saw him. The True Symposium probably had a problem with me slacking off for such a long time. It was easy to guess where this problem came from. Either the Bardi Empire's diplomatic announcement, the Dragons' secret report, or the Truth Symposium's internal members objecting to me. Since the Truth Symposium sent my old friend to supervise me, that meant that the situation wasn't too bad. It was probably just some political consideration. I understand. I'll speed up the matter with the dragons. That's not the problem. It's that there's been a change in your other job. Another job? As expected, you forgot. I'm the Mage Country's ambassador to the Bardi Empire. Now that Bardi is facing a major problem, the southern and northern battlefront have collapsed. Helen has lost the battle against the Holy Light's allied armies, and the undead have also lost the battle. The Truth Symposium wants me to tell you this news and request that you take action as soon as possible. They want you to meet with the dragons as soon as possible, and it'll be best if the dragons appear to stabilize the situation. We absolutely can't allow Bardi to collapse just like this. Jinx, Super Jinx, your system is currently considering whether or not to create a new title for you, Ship-Wrecking Demon. What does this have to do with ships? This title is written in yellow. I'm not Bailey. I've been on many ships before. Please call me young lad. I have high hopes for you. Harlow's faint words and my system's malicious voice simultaneously echoed in my ears. However, I didn't have the time to think about all this. This was going to be fun. I strolled around on a tall metal platform in my laboratory, inspecting the latest developments in every laboratory. My old man was still nagging behind me, but the things in my mind were even more annoying. According to my secret agreement with Orlos, Bardi absolutely couldn't lose, nor should they lose. If Bardi's situation became unstable, then my secret agreement with Orlas would become useless, and my plan would be impossible to carry out. This meant that I needed to think of a way to help Barty. As for the undead, they lacked the determination to fight to the bitter end before the undead emperors arrived. Not only that, the wood spirits were dragging them down. Plus, the Barty Empire's citizens were quite resistant to Barty, and they had plenty of elite troops. Counterattacking might be difficult, but maintaining the front lines shouldn't be a problem. As for the Eastern battlefront, based on my understanding of the Holy Church, this unexpected victory would cause the Holy Church to fall into a state of ecstasy. It would be almost certain that they would continue their crusade against the heretics. Orlas and I hadn't prepared for the possibility of the Holy Church losing this battle. Even if Hallant suddenly becomes an idiot, he has several dozen dragons and dragon elders with him. How could he possibly lose? But now Hallant had lost. I couldn't make any judgments until I had more concrete information. Still, I needed to at least try to salvage the situation. The problem was, I really can't leave right now. What's so important? That thing beneath your feet. The metal bridge we were on was built on top of a volcanic area. Underneath the bridge were gigantic white bones. Each bone was far larger than a so-called giant. We could only see a small portion of the bones as we looked around. Many staff members wearing protective gear were currently working on the bones. What's that? The Tiger God's rune. It's our greatest harvest here. It's the Eternal Thunder Tribe's original belief and ancestor. Just one of its ribs is more than 30 meters tall. If all of them stood up, they'd definitely be incredible mega monsters. From another source, it's highly likely that it was a pet of a Titan giant from back in the day. The most likely target is the fourth Titan giant, Eanes. We met him before at Oaktown. You're excavating its corpse? An ancient beast corpse is indeed a valuable research material. However, you could just leave the work to your subordinates and go back to Dragon City to do your own work. Have you ever heard of an undead mage who can shout to stop when he's creating an undead creature? The summoning of the undead has already begun. If you stop now, such a top-quality material will be wasted. Something like resurrection? You're insane. You just realized? Chapter 404. In the ancient legends of Orlo Diadon, the creator of this world was a group of giants that covered the sky. And in the Ghostwind Plains, there was a gigantic beast that was their most trusted warrior. Its body was incomparably tall, and could walk across this plain in 15 breaths. Its claws and teeth were incomparably sharp, and even the cliffs could not stop its attack. When it roared in anger, the entire plain would tremble. Let's not talk about legends for now. The Eternal Thunder Tribe's culture is incredibly primitive. We even discovered hieroglyphs and murals. Most of their records were passed down orally. In some places, the Tiger God Seal's power has already surpassed that of the Creator Gods. Of course, that's absolutely impossible. But based on our excavations of its bones and the construction of its original structure, it was estimated that this beast was more than 10 times the size of an ancient dragon. That means that it was at least 100 feet long. Some of the records seem to be true. It was capable of casually swallowing a dragon whole. What a terrifying monster. This entire plains had become an archaeological site. Numerous excavation teams were busy helping me find the remaining bones to reconstruct this gigantic beast. And all I had to do was maintain a basic soul-summoning spell and use the attraction between the bones to guide my subordinates to where the other parts of the beast were hidden. This is truly a gigantic building puzzle game. Tim Ladd's exclamation was quite fitting of his age. Actually, he was becoming more and more important in our faction. Many inconceivable technical difficulties had been easily solved by him. I didn't even know what level his research level had reached, but it was certain that he was far more advanced than anyone in the game's history. If this was a jigsaw puzzle, then this would definitely be a rib. Even its rib is so much taller than me. This beast is truly a terrifying beast. Venerated Archmage, this isn't a rib. It's a fingernail. The one making a fuss over nothing was the old child, Cade, who refused to leave. The dragon that brought him here had left him here, so Cade decided to stay here as well. Doesn't that mean that he's a moving mountain when he stands up? Nothing would be able to block a single attack from him. Even his battle pet is so powerful. Just how powerful is Master Titan? Yeah, if it's possible, I don't want to fight the Titan Giants at all. Even though the elemental essence was now in balance, and the speed at which the seals were being unraveled was greatly decreasing, the Titan Giants' return was still something that couldn't be stopped. The Titan Giants' clones and incarnations were already capable of roaming the mortal plane. Naturally, they would be able to cause trouble in Dragon World as well. Anyone who tried to stop them from unraveling their seals would naturally become their mortal enemy. Transforming this gigantic beast into an undead creature would not only allow one to understand the Titan's strength, but it would also be an excellent material that no necromancer would be able to resist. As long as it can move, even if it's just a skeleton soldier that can only punch and kick, it's already almost invincible. Titan Eanes, just how ridiculous is he? Generally speaking, a creature's strength was directly linked to its body size, and its body size was related to the environment it grew in and the conditions of the world. The cruel nature would naturally eliminate existences that could not adapt to the world. Sounds confusing? Let's just get straight to the point. Under the same conditions of oxygen, gravity, temperature, and so on, most creatures wouldn't have much difference in size in order to adapt to the environment. Lions, tigers, elephants, and so on were all of the same species. Every creature had its own reason for existing. In Hei's world, high magic was the only requirement for a gigantic creature to survive. If the environment changed, such a creature would naturally have no chance of surviving. That was to say, even if a gigantic beast was raised, its heart and internal circulatory system would be unable to adapt to the environment, and it was likely that it would die of heart failure in a short period of time. Of course, there were also existences that seemed to be exceptions, such as giants and dragons. However, they were actually in line with this rule as well. After all, they lived in an era that was called the Immemorial Era, and they were able to exist mostly because they weren't pure wild beasts. They were magical beasts that could control the power of the elements. And in Hei's universe, there were many such examples, such as the giant ink octopus in the deep sea, the giant sandworms in the earth elemental plane, and the half-elemental heaven whale. However, the reason they were able to grow so large was because of their biological structure and living environment. These types of ancient existences were often given the laudatory names of gold bloodlines and diamond bloodlines. They were born with the power to control magic and mysteries flowed within their bloodlines. They were able to control their natural abilities and use their natural magic. This was something that other species would never be able to achieve, even if they worked hard for their entire lives. However, there were always advantages and disadvantages to everything. They were used to living in a high elemental tide, so they were unable to adapt to the low magic level. If a human's blood sugar was too low, they would become sleepy. If a dragon's blood's mana density was too low, they would also become sleepy. Only the ancient artifacts knew that in the immemorial era, dragons didn't have the habit of sleeping for decades or centuries. And as the mana in their bloodline decreased, it became increasingly difficult for them to reproduce. The more powerful a creature was, the more difficult it would be for them to reproduce. As for angels, they weren't the angel species from myths and legends. Instead, they were the angel species from the first generation of order species. As pure creatures of order, they were more sensitive to their environment. In the end, their entire species disappeared from the mortal plane, and if my guess was correct, the angel species would soon return to the mortal plane as the elemental tide increased. However, the creature before me had broken the most basic rule of all. It had broken the most basic rule of how a creature should adapt to its environment. First of all, it was an individual creature. Secondly, judging from its current biological structure, there was no foundational difference between this creature and the Eternal Thunder People. Its feet even had barbs for climbing, and its right arm was covered in wear and tear from wielding a sword for a long period of time. Considering that even the Titan giants didn't have such ridiculous trees for it to climb, one frightening conclusion after another was laid out before us. Perhaps this mountain-like tiger god was just an ordinary eternal thunder person in the past. It was just that Eanes forcefully distorted its biological structure and transformed it into such a gigantic creature. Has the cause of its death been determined yet? None of its bones have any obvious external injuries, and its bones show no signs of weakening. Combined with the eternal Thunder People's legends, it's most likely that it starved to death. I frowned. This sounded rather strange to me, but if I thought about it carefully, I felt that it was quite possible. Its gigantic body meant an even greater consumption of energy. When this tiger god lost its master and subordinates that worshipped it, its original survival skills and hunting techniques were no longer able to support its consumption. The prey it worked so hard to gather wasn't even enough for a single bite, so it naturally starved to death. Transforming an ordinary warrior into a gigantic magical beast is at a Titan Giant's power level. We had already witnessed the fourth Titan Giant's beast-taming abilities in Oaktown. An ordinary white lion had transformed into a divine beast with the power level of a semi-god. If a sealed Titan Giant was unsealed, its power level would likely be even more ridiculous. Of course, I didn't believe that it would be easy to create such a warrior. Otherwise, the legends wouldn't be the strongest warrior under the command of the creator giants, but the giant warriors under the command of the Titan gods. Is there enough mana in the mana pool? There's enough. The elemental tide's density here is quite high, and the mana pool is already operating at full capacity. Plus, the mages are replenishing mana, so the recovery rate has already surpassed the consumption rate. There was a limit to how many undead mages could summon undead. With my current level of mana, I would have long since become a dried corpse if I had to summon such a monster under normal circumstances. However, I had already constructed a mage tower here. If I used the mage tower to cast spells, I would be able to use the mage tower's mana reserves to pay for the mana consumption. Of course, most undead mages would choose something like a soul summoning tower, but the mage tower's regular buff and mana replenishment abilities would still be usable. Summoning a bone dragon required a legend-ranked undead lich. Logically speaking, my gold-ranked mana wouldn't even be able to summon a single bone dragon. Even if I added the mage tower's mana reserves, it would still be far from enough. However, I had once reached the peak of my power level and found a solution to this problem. You can't afford it all at once? Then let's do it in installments. My inability to leave right now wasn't an excuse or an excuse. Right now, the mage tower, and this corpse were all bound by invisible chains. I was constantly on high alert. My mana and spirit were amplified by the mage tower, and I gathered the mana reserve in the mage tower's mana pool to continuously summon undead from this corpse. Ordinary undead mages would summon undead creatures, find a target, connect their spirits, and pay mana. Either they succeed or they fail. However, I was able to turn this into a continuous state, turning the one-time payment into installments every second. Every second, I was plagued by a headache from overexerting myself. I wanted to fall asleep, but I knew that if I really fell asleep, not only would the summoning fail, I would also suffer from the backlash of the spell's failure. When this forbidden undead summoning spell went out of control, all the mana retroaction would come to me at once, and I might even die on the spot. As expected, overcasting spells will cause one's spirit to become tired and sleepy. This has nothing to do with overcasting spells. Your soul's strength has been repeatedly tempered by the cycle of reincarnation. Now, you can basically ignore the cycle of reincarnation. Spirit magic is basically useless against you, so how could this little bit of mana retroaction possibly harm you? An ordinary undead mage's soul would have long since collapsed if they continuously cast spells for such a long period of time. You're still alive and kicking, which means that your spirit is far from being exhausted. From a mage's perspective, the silly cat's conclusion was basically the same as the truth. However, I still felt that it was quite strange. Then why do I feel so uncomfortable all over? My head feels like it's splitting, and I feel so sleepy. Idiot, it's your fault for not sleeping at all. This is a normal physiological reaction. If a normal person doesn't sleep for 4 days, they'll probably die already. You only have a headache and sleepiness, which means that your body is super healthy. Oh, I see. All right then, It seemed that not sleeping for a long period of time would still affect one's intelligence. Even if I intentionally pretended to be stupid, it seemed that I had indeed accidentally made a stupid mistake this time. It'll probably take a few more days. Based on the speed at which you're excavating and casting the spell, it'll probably take another 3 days. Persevere. Didn't you notice that your mana is increasing? Do your best. Overusing one's mana was a double drain on one's physical body and soul. However, if one was able to survive, it would actually increase one's total mana. However, it was far too dangerous. Nobody would be willing to risk their lives just for this tiny bit of improvement. So, you're saying that I'm constantly overusing my mana? At the same time, I'm constantly casting spells. This was doubtlessly a test as well as an opportunity. The Mage Tower had cost a tremendous amount of resources, the soul and experience of someone who had experienced the cycle of reincarnation, and the support of a large number of mages. If any of these factors were missing, this experiment would have failed. However, it would be far too much of a pity to give up now. As long as you can complete this spell, at the very least, your total mana will increase by 1 rank. Legend rank mana? Alright, I'll endure it, but I'm a little bored. Harloise, can you sing a little tune to relieve your boredom? Meow, 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 the cats march. Is it nice? Harloise's eyes were already squinting into slits as she waved her paws and purposefully meowed softly. The silly cat was trying to act cute, but Roland was recording it in his memory crystal. Haha, I'm going to show it to my old friends later. I'm going to show everyone that the Queen of Banshees has forgotten her past after being a cat for so long. How much will you pay in exchange for this crystal? Ah, why are you biting me again? Roland, you bastard. Chapter 405. H.E.'s New Year's First News Summary. So it wasn't written by the fairies? It's a new journal jointly created by San Antonio, the Mage Country, and several other major countries. Just the number of copies sold in each country is astonishing. Whoever controls public opinion will have the right to speak. Nobody's an idiot these days. This morning, a blue dragon suddenly flew over the campsite. Apart from the invitation letter, this journal was also included in the gift package. Although it wasn't color-printed, the paper was excellent, the wording was exquisite, and the content was well illustrated. Let me see what important news it is that requires a swift dragon to deliver it to me. The moment I flipped to the first page, I immediately closed it. Ultraman fights small monsters? Isn't there something wrong with the style? The headlines already seemed ridiculous, but the silly cat scurried out from a corner. Let me see, what Ultraman? It's obviously the cloud giants that vanished from the world have returned to the mortal world. On the battlefield between Barty and the Holy Church, they viciously taught the dragons a lesson. Halen's army was forced to retreat after a bitter battle. Cloud giants? There are actually cloud giants in the mortal plane. Needless to say, the giant that was glowing all over really looked like the legendary Ultraman, the Giant of Light. The dragons that were being beaten by the giant on the ground really looked like little monsters that were shouting shameful lines as they appeared on the stage. Cloud giants were one of the strongest subspecies of giants. They were known as the Titan's favorites. Cloud giants were the tallest of all giants and had the most extravagant appearances. It was said that all of them were handsome men and beautiful women who wore extravagant clothing. Cloud giants were also born with natural talent for controlling clouds and mist. They were also skilled at learning divine arts. However, most people were known for their outstanding talent in art and music. Many majestic palaces were built by cloud giants. Bards sang about cloud giants' masterpieces and treated them as their teachers. Of course, since cloud giants were also the most intelligent of all giants, cloud giants could produce mages, priests, and other combat job classes. Cloud giants were also one of the few giants that were skilled at organizing and fighting in teams. Perhaps cloud giants couldn't compare to the lava giants, who were skilled in martial arts, but cloud giants' battle teams were definitely the scariest of all giants. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the cloud giants in the mortal plane. It was rumored that the cloud giants had already left the mortal plane in order to escape from the curse of stupidity. But it would seem that the cloud giants, who were rumored to love peace and art, still made their choice under the summons of the Titan giants. If it was the cloud giants, Halen's defeat would be understandable. Not only that, we'll still be able to understand and remotely control the outside world while we're sealed. We'll have to increase our vigilance and evaluation of the Titans even more. What caught his attention the most was the sentence that was underlined in red at the back of the message. P.S. Legend has it that angels appeared in this battle. However, according to our investigations, they were only mercenaries from the Winged Tribe who voluntarily participated in this battle. The despicable Holy Church used these Winged Tribe members as angels in order to shake the Bardi warriors' resolve. An angel appeared? I asked directly, and Cade nodded. Yes, but didn't the higher-ups say that it's the Winged Tribe? Considering the political standpoint of this magazine, yep, since it was jointly published by the royalty and the government, it was only natural that it wouldn't go along with the Holy Church's wishes. If it said that the Winged Tribe was the Winged Tribe, I would actually feel that it was more likely that it was the angels. After all, the difference between the Winged Tribe and the angels was like the difference between a hen and a phoenix. The former were only humans who could fly, while the latter had an ancient bloodline comparable to dragons. It would be far too obvious if they fought on the battlefield, considering how the angels had a high status in the hearts of ordinary humans in Aichi. They were extremely positive characters in all sorts of myths and legends, and also acted as god envoys for the gods. If the Holy Church truly had angels appear on their side, it would naturally be a severe blow to the newly risen church of pure holy light. And if angels appeared on the enemy's side, it would also cause ordinary warriors to waver. Not to mention, angel warriors were generally quite strong in combat. In that case, if the Holy Church's expeditionary army had the help of angels and cloud giants, Halen's defeat would be completely understandable. The enemies are the pure angels and the art-loving cloud giants. We have a bunch of undead and evil dragons on our side, as well as dark elves, evil underground creatures, and goblins who value money as much as their lives. Why do I feel like we're the antagonists? You just realized? The enemy faction has cloud giants and angels. I'm afraid that our morale will be affected. It doesn't matter. Race is definitely not a righteous reason, nor is it a reason to slaughter. Why should we be troubled by the opinions of those idiots? I wasn't worried about our morale. Rather, the fact that a large portion of the angels had already become the Order True God subordinates. Since they were participating in a mortal battle, it was highly likely that some god had decided to interfere. And based on my understanding of the Holy Church's fanatics, when they feel that they've received the god's favor and feel that their actions represent the god's will, even the most vile actions will become holy, and even the most evil intentions will be viewed as the god's benevolence. Rather than believing in the logic of fanatics, it's better to believe that evil villains whose hands are stained with blood will voluntarily repent. Speak like a human. A great massacre and purge. Then, they'll confidently prepare to fight all the way to the Bardi capital. They'll furiously increase their troops and force other countries to join the Holy Light Army. They'll escalate this small-scale battle into an Armageddon. I believe that they're capable of doing such a thing. That's far too direct, but I have to say, the more I think about it, the more likely it seems. This is completely the Holy Church that we know. If the Holy Church appears victorious and uses the name of the Holy Light to summon other major countries that believe in the Holy Light to participate in this battle, it'll likely escalate into a world war. There are some things that Harlow-East didn't say out loud, but we all understood. Bardi was a mega empire, after all. Bardi had accumulated an astonishing amount of resources and wealth. It was obvious that Bardi was on the losing end of the war against Bardi. Those greedy predators now had a righteous excuse to attack Bardi. How could they possibly miss out on such a good opportunity? I put down this journal and fell into a state of confusion. At the same time as the game's history, the entire world had entered the Vulture of War expansion pack. The elves and beastmen were at war, and all the major countries were fighting each other for the sake of ambition. I originally thought that I had avoided the worst possible outcome, but I never expected that the game's history would be so unpredictable. I actually mysteriously returned to square one. No, the situation has already changed. The Bardi Empire in the game's history is destined to be destroyed. No matter how things develop, the ending won't be any worse than this. Besides, it's only a local war right now. It might not come to that. I just need to hurry up. I opened up this journal again, intended to take a look at what else had happened recently. Asterisk clap. Asterisk, however, I only took a single glance before I dropped the journal on the ground. The second page of the Bardi Empire's battlefield contained even more infuriating news. San Antonio has declared war on the Foss Empire, Siwan Dukedom, and other countries. Both sides' night squadrons have already exchanged fire on the Siwan Dukedom's Yao Bear Plains. San Antonio has achieved a great victory. I had an icy expression as I flipped to the next page. This only made me more and more annoyed. The Swolo Federation demands that the Kasola Kingdom hand over the seal of the sea god that they stole. Marshal Ben emphasizes that if the Kasola Kingdom continues to remain silent, the Swolo Federation will consider waging war to take back their national treasure. New sea tribes and sea monsters have appeared on the Ottoman Empire's borders. Lady Storm's priests and priestesses have appeared on the battlefield. Organized sea giants have also joined the battle. The war between the Ottoman Empire and the Sea Tribe has escalated. The Heen Kingdom of the Elves has announced that it will become the San-Heen Empire. Moon Elf Queen Afina has declared herself the new Elven Empress. She also demands that all other Elven kingdoms submit to her. 16 kingdoms of the Elves have declared their allegiance, and 23 kingdoms had declared war on the Elven Empire. The Elven Civil War has begun. Silly cat, don't tear. What's it to see if you tear? Boiling black mana began to boil on the silly cat's body. A screaming banshee shadow formed on the black cat's body. This was the first time I had ever seen Harloise so angry. It was evident that she was truly angry. I wisely ignored Harloise, who was currently bristling with anger. From a certain standpoint, the re-establishment of the Gold Elf Empire would perhaps have new historical significance for ordinary elves. However, for a Gold Elf descendant like Harloise, this would be nothing more than a traitor wearing the crown that originally belonged to her. This was a deep-seated hatred that she would never forgive. As I continued reading, there were many similar news articles. Some of them didn't seem very interesting, but if I really thought about them, they would be quite troublesome. Traces of gigantic insectoids have been discovered in the North Sea. These insectoids have taken over the nearby underground ruins. These insectoids have incredibly high combat strength and are naturally resistant to magic. They are suspected to be an immemorial species. A large number of ogres have appeared in the San Anton Empire's Osaphalon region. There are many subspecies of ogres in the snowy plains, mountain cliffs, and forests. The San Anton Empire's government is warning all nearby residents to be on high alert. They'll be organizing a crusade against the ogres soon. So many troublesome things happened at the same time. This seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually a type of necessity. Now that the Holy War had begun, the ambitions that had been suppressed for thousands of years were finally unrestrained. Now that winter had passed, and the spring of a new year was the time for the long-prepared plans to begin. The ambitious individuals who had been prepared for this for a long time finally extended their tentacles, and the world of Aichi was now filled with many things. I closed this magazine and glanced at the silly cat, who was still fuming with anger for no reason. Her ethereal projection kept screaming while her physical body was glaring at the magazine. I shook my head. Some things seemed like I had let go of them, but they had actually always been in my heart. They were weaknesses that no one wanted to touch. If anyone dared to touch the land in the Northlands, I would probably end up just like her. I would act like an injured beast, hide in a corner, and roar at everyone. As for Harloise, perhaps the scars in her heart that she didn't want to be opened up the most was the elven crown that had originally belonged to the Gold Elves. How many generations of inheritance and how many former Gold Elves' glory had finally fallen from her hands? The pain of losing her country? The pain of being betrayed by someone she trusted? The feeling of helplessness as she watched everything head towards Armageddon? Perhaps it was because we were both in the same boat and recalled the Mist Kingdom back in the day. Or perhaps it was because I simply didn't want to see anyone bully my pet but I felt rather sad and displeased as I looked at this silent, ethereal projection. That was why I made this promise. Relax. As long as I'm here, no matter who it is, they'll never be able to easily wear this crown that belongs to the Gold Elves. Chapter 406. I had traveled to many places in the past, and I also loved the scenery of traveling. In fact, I had even gained many things and comprehended many things on my travels. Perhaps this was the origin of my soul imprint, the Ice Traveler. The icy tundra was pure white, and the towering snow-capped mountains were so high that even breathing was a luxury. That was a forbidden zone for both life and color. In that despairing place where there was nothing at all, I learned to abandon myself. That's right, this wasn't something grand like emptying one's soul. It was a self-exile that represented abandonment and expulsion. In that land of snow where it was impossible to tell the difference between the sky and the earth, I was abandoned there. I interrogated my own soul in that despairing and deathly dream. Why is this world so difficult? Why can't we just want to live well? Why is it so difficult to live? Why is it that brave warriors who gave up everything and sacrificed themselves still lost their homes and loved ones, and even had their names tarnished after death? Are there really no fairy tales in reality? Are good people supposed to go to hell? Is this all my fault? Is this my sin? If I was wrong, wouldn't it have been enough to just punish me? Why did so many good people have to accompany me to hell? My memories of the past kept replaying themselves. Those faces that made me feel guilty, regretful, and yearning for them would never let me go. Those malicious insults would never leave my ears. It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, a self-righteous transmigrator, how could our country have perished? The twin stars of misfortune? No, no, no. The only misfortune is you, the outsider who took over the prince's body. It's all because of you, the jinx, that our citizens were slaughtered and driven to despair. It's all your fault. Why are you the only one who survived? Why don't you go to hell to accompany us? His face, which used to be kind and amiable in the past, was now distorted by hatred. His originally kind greeting caused me to spend dawn after dawn in curses and curses. That's right. Why am I still alive? Heavens, why am I the only one left alive? I want to die. Let me die. I don't know how I got through those dreamlike days, because I no longer have any memory or the concept of time. Looking back, even my memories are just fragments. The only thing I can remember clearly is the snow white and coldness. Perhaps I didn't make it through and had already sunk into complete insanity at that moment. It was only my final bit of luck and coincidence that brought me back from the endless insanity. Perhaps during that period of time, I was half crazy and half lucid. When I was crazy, I was cursing the heavens for being unfair, and when I was lucid, I was cursing my own powerlessness and weakness. Reality and dreams were twisted together, and my idealistic thinking and twisted madness were actually able to fuse together. Perhaps this was the most logical explanation for my fragmented memories. But in the end, I made it through. My rationality, which I had regained from my despair, told me that even in death, those who had trusted me still stood firmly under my flag. How could they possibly regret their choice and trust in me? A knight's heart is like a fortress of steel. It's pure and doesn't tolerate any impurities. I actually suspected that they would regret following me. That's the greatest insult to them. I'm such an unqualified ruler. Even now, I'm still doubting their loyalty and trust. Even though I recovered my rationality, I still chose to live alone in a glacier. I faced my true self and heart in a peaceful life. I interrogated my own soul and memories bit by bit, and took stock of my past mistakes in the dark night of Stove. If only I had been a bit more mature in my thinking, a bit more sly, a bit more shameless, a bit more cruel, perhaps I wouldn't have failed. I had always liked lively scenes, but I gradually fell in love with the color that represented ice in the snow-white world. That was because I knew that in the face of despair, impassioned emotions would be just as meaningless as grand slogans. Calm and sensitive thoughts were the only path to salvation. I desired to freeze my rationality beneath the glacier. If possible, I wished to leave my anger beneath the snow mountain. That way, I wouldn't lose control of my emotions because of anger, nor would I do something that I regretted in the past. Insanity and anger are meaningless. The impulsiveness of a hot-blooded youth will only bring endless pain. I despise anger. I curse insanity, and I desire to become a bystander in a desperate situation. I didn't know when, but I no longer felt anger. Instead, two soul shards that represented anger appeared on my neck. From then on, I became a traveler who traveled alone on an icy mountain. I engraved that scene into my soul and entered the realm of legends again, laying down the foundation for me to reach the peak. Perhaps I really did it. I became a bystander who could appreciate the brilliance of Armageddon's arrival and make the calmest decision in a desperate situation. Perhaps I was simply a cripple who had cut off my own soul shards. I was a lunatic who thought that I had calmed down. But no matter what, I didn't regret it. After all, that was my past. It was my own choice. It was a sin that I should bear for eternity. I will never regret the intense light hurt my eyes. Tears actually flowed out of my eyes. My pillow was covered in tears. Is it this dream again? When I looked carefully, I saw that the sun and the moon were hanging in the sky. Looking at the position between the two stars, it seemed that it was already dawn. Do you often have this dream? The golden-haired young elf girl was sitting on my pillow. Her silky blonde hair was all over the bed, and there were still traces of her pillow on her white and tender thighs. Her usual mocking and arrogant tone of voice now contained a rare hint of concern and nervousness. Her bright red cheeks were tinged with shyness and a blush. I shook my head and tossed these boring emotions aside. I tossed the liquid that represented weakness to the corner of the room. I shook my head and opened my eyes. The next moment, the young and energetic Roland had returned. No, it's all things that I've already forgotten. I don't know why, but I've been dreaming about it this week. By the way, who are you? How did you get in here? Is this some prank that wants to ruin my reputation? I told you, I'm not a Lilicon. I'm a great maid lover. All right then. The little girl's expression of concern instantly transformed into one of anger. She then smacked her lips and suddenly transformed into a bird that was about to bite me. Don't bite me. Ah, this feeling? You're Harloise? Aren't you a cat? Reality proved that it was easy for people to have low blood pressure when they first woke up. It was only natural for their memories to be unclear, but recognizing the wrong person or calling the wrong name at a critical moment would be fatal. Oh, I remember now. I'm sorry. Harloise, I was in a daze just now. Don't bite me. I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding. I'm really bleeding. I finally managed to take off the fake loli on my head. I made a bunch of promises before I managed to coax Harloise to apply some medicine on my head. You're having a flashback dream. This is your soul urging you to create a soul imprint. When I asked her about the dream, Harloise gave her a firm and resolute judgment. I think that's a memory from when I created the Ice Traveler's soul imprint. What a pity. My death in that life must have been quite a grand one, and I lost the most memories. Would I have such a dream while creating a soul imprint? I don't think I had such a memory before. Of course, in the past, you were creating a new soul imprint, and you were gathering all of your life experiences. Now, you're restoring your past soul imprint. You need to face your past self, even if it's an incredibly sad past. My past self? What a sad past. No wonder I forgot about it. Wait a moment. How do you know that it's a past memory and that it's a sad past? You actually dare to peek? Did you use magic to peek in my dream? You should know that cats are incredibly curious creatures. The next instant, the blonde loli transformed into a silly cat. She even scratched her face with her claws and acted cute. Harloise was getting better and better at fooling people. However, I forced out a sentence through gritted teeth. A cat's curiosity? Yep, perhaps we should first talk about how cats died. It hadn't even been a month since they entered this world, but many of the warriors here had already made breakthroughs. Most of them had been stuck at a bottleneck for a long time and naturally broke through after spending some time in this high elemental tide environment. However, these breakthroughs shouldn't be underestimated. In the human world, most mortals would work hard their entire lives, and even with the help of a great teacher and resources, they would only be able to reach the peak of silver. Otherwise, gold masters wouldn't be so popular. And if all the peak silver masters who were treated as mortals easily broke through to gold, their decades of accumulation would transform into actual power, and their combat strength would increase by at least 3 times. Advancing from gold to legend rank was even more of a summation and accumulation of one's life. There was still a path to gold, but legend rank was a path where you worked hard your entire life, and you were just a tiny bit away from reaching it. If you couldn't comprehend it, then you couldn't. However, some people did indeed comprehend it, but due to old age or injuries, they were physically and mentally exhausted and were still unable to break through to legend rank. This wasn't an isolated case. Life was short, and young people were full of energy. Young people didn't know about worries. It was only when people were old and about to die, or when they suffer a major setback, that they would sincerely reflect on their past, and only then would they comprehend how to break through to legend rank. But by then, it would already be too late. Their physical bodies, which were nearing the end of their lives, wouldn't be able to withstand the torment. Meanwhile, these veteran mercenaries and warriors had mysteriously recovered from their injuries and extended their lifespans in this high elemental tide environment, allowing them to surpass this hurdle. Just being stationed here gave these young warriors tremendous benefits and allowed the veteran warriors to regain their combat strength. Naturally, they also gained more confidence in our cause. Of course, in a few decades, perhaps the entire world would have such benefits. However, at that time, the tide would rise, and our enemies would be even more difficult to deal with. But actually, I was the one who benefited the most from all this joy. That 7-day soul summoning session had ended, and the tremendous consumption caused me to immediately fall asleep. However, I also forcefully raised my magic power to legend rank. Soul imprints, which would normally be a problem for most people for their entire lives, weren't a problem from the very start. I was forced to swiftly create my own soul imprint, forcing me to face myself. How difficult. Although entering legend or even saint rank is a necessary condition to complete my grand plan, I really don't want to have that dream again. In that case, you can try creating other soul imprints first, but they won't be any better. Thinking about what other soul imprints represented and their memories, my expression instantly became strange. I then viciously glared at the silly cat who didn't know what was good for her. "You bastard, did you peek in my dream again? Otherwise, how would you know that they're all pitiful? Humph. Is there even need to look at them? Isn't your life nothing more than tableware? It's already filled with tragedies. No matter how you look at them, there's no comedy to be seen." Comedy? There's such a thing? The silly cat's comedy of seeking death, Schrodinger's cat. Excellent reviews. Guess if this cat is dead or alive. Chapter 407. Even if I didn't receive any news from the outside world, I knew what would happen. The world would never revolve around a single person's wishes. There were plenty of examples of people being crushed by the wheel of history. If someone was truly capable of predicting the future's development, it would be much more practical to make some preparations beforehand and earn some money. If someone wanted to become a major country because of this, then the butterfly effect they created would be enough to kill them. Those who obey the heavens shall prosper, and those who defy the heavens shall perish. Defying the heavens and changing fate? If you want to use your individual strength to change the entire world, you'll need to be mentally prepared to die several hundred times over. Even I had never thought of forcefully defying the heavens and changing fate. All I wanted was to slowly accumulate power and make some changes in the corner, attempting to become the foretales that could change the entire world. Directly wipe out all the enemies? I've never thought of that before, but I can start by weakening the enemy forces, increasing our combat strength, and delaying the enemy armies from reaching the mortal plane. I don't need to single-handedly defeat the innumerable demons and monsters, but I can increase the number and quality of the heroes. Accumulating small victories will lead to a major victory, which will ultimately turn the situation around. The truth was that my strategy was already somewhat effective. The justice point system and the currently developing magical engineering had doubtlessly increased the average combat strength and potential of the entire mortal plane. Once technology reached a certain level, it would be possible to upgrade it twice every 10 years. These advantages of being in the lead would only become greater and greater as time passed. The changes in the underground and the Northlands gave us new hope. These were all important changes that hadn't been seen in the game's history. The Holy Church, which had originally been the leader of the Holy Church, had been shaken to its foundations. This might seem like a personal grudge, and fine, I did admit that I had a personal grudge, but if you looked at the game's history, you would see that what was scarier than godlike enemies and pig-like teammates were idiotic superiors who thought they were gods. I think that we have a great advantage. Hey, let's go over. Hold your ground and hold your ground. As long as you can last until next week, your victory will be a celebration for Pope Artie's birthday. Reinforcements? Reinforcements might arrive next month. No, they're not here to collect corpses, nor are they here to steal credit. But one of them is the son of a cardinal. You know what I mean? Damn it. You actually dared to hang up on me? Be careful that I don't judge you as a heretic. Alliance? With those heretics? And those dark-skinned aliens? May the holy light descend upon their heads and burn these villains to death. We need more holy wars. Perhaps the greatest taboo on the battlefield was having amateurs command experts in a strange battle. Yet, during that period of history, the Holy Church, at its peak, forcibly became the core of the Order allied armies with the help of many true God incarnations, God envoys, and angels. They sent bishops to every country to supervise the war. But the result was that these newly appointed warlords claimed that they were here to comfort the warriors and deliver God's grace. But they actually played a significant role in the early stages of the war. Yep, they played a positive role for the enemy. As for why the Holy Light was only effective in the early stages, apart from the fact that the various countries began to make the Grand Warlords a figurehead, it was more because as the wars progressed, the accumulated failures and disasters caused more and more people to believe in the Holy Light. However, this also caused the reputation of the Holy Church, the executor of the Holy Light, to drop to the ground. The reason? Warriors who were forced to the brink would be willing to do everything in their power to take down any bastard that tried to blindly command them. The cruel war would naturally cause these old officials to be eliminated. And even if the Southern sect didn't do anything, new sects would still appear in the game's history. The Holy Knight and Holy Light priests would distance themselves from the high and mighty bishops. The strongest Holy Knight of the Miracle Hand would lead a team to leave the Holy Church. This was something that the game's history required, as well as the development of the situation at that time. It was impossible to stop. Of course, the losses they caused would be impossible to make up for. And now, the future would be much better than in the game's history. With the Holy Church's current reputation, not only would they not send out bishops as warlords, they would have to first deal with the Southern sect before deciding what to do. Besides, with the incident at Oaktown, where the Southern sect falsely claimed military achievements, the Holy Church had a reason to refuse the Southern sect's offer. It was obviously impossible to imagine the Southern sect as the Holy Church in the game's history. Just from these two aspects alone, history had already changed. However, the world's development would never go as one wished. While there were advantages, there would naturally be disadvantages as well. For example, the Bardi Empire. In the game's history, the Titan Giants and Undead Emperors had fought to the point of mutual destruction. In the end, the Titan Giants became the Undead Emperors. This was a miracle that would be impossible to replicate. Although the Bardi Empire still existed, the Titan Giants and Undead Emperors were all real threats. Since the Titan Giants and Undead Emperors were called miracles, it meant that this was an example that couldn't be replicated. It was highly likely that the Titan Giants and Undead Emperors would become major problems in the future. And now, although the overall situation was better than in the game's history, what should have happened had still happened. Now that the world was in chaos, it would be unrealistic to try to stop the wars one by one. Even if it was forcefully done, it would be a waste of manpower and resources with nothing to show for it. After all, this was just like a boat with countless holes in it. Even if you try to fix the holes one by one, new holes would constantly appear. By the time all the holes were fixed, the boat would have already sunk. That was why, at this time, any small skirmishes in the corner would be meaningless. Since it was already time for blood to be shed, I was prepared to use any means necessary to obtain victory. To use a rather inappropriate phrase, come at me directly if you dare. Cough. It seemed that there was a grammatical error in the translation. The original phrase should have been come at me directly if you dare. It was all the fault of the naughty subtitles team. Are you ready? I patted the dust off my cape. This new set of clothes that had just been delivered to me by express delivery wouldn't have been cheap. The brilliant blue crown had the emblem of moonlight on it. Starlight gathered on it, and the god equipment's crown was like a shining crescent on my forehead. I was still unable to fully control the god equipment's power. My slightly closed eyes were filled with divine light. This was the moon god's purest power. Patricia's protection. High-level god equipment crown. This is the moon goddess's most beloved crown. It is an extravagant crown created from the essence of moonlight. It is forever surrounded by starlight, and the wearer will feel as if they are surrounded by the stars. Actually, the wearer will indeed be blessed by the stars. This crown is also known as the most beautiful crown in the world. In ancient times, it caused multiple god wars between the moon goddess and the goddess of beauty. Ability 1, Seal. Ability 2, Seal. Function 7, Dazzling Starlight Summon. Summon countless stars to descend and deal a devastating blow to the surroundings with you as the core. Number of uses, 1 per month. System notification, Princess Peach. If you wear this crown that even the goddess of beauty would be jealous of, you will be the most beautiful flower at the ball. But considering the fact that the moment you activate this god equipment's only unsealed ability, everyone will accompany you to watch a meteor shower. The entire Dragon City will ascend together with you, so you will also be the most dangerous flower at the ball. Another system notification, considering that the goddess of laughter, the goddess of beauty, and a dozen other goddesses have yet to give up on this crown. If you don't want to die, to goddess descending from the heavens, object descending from the heavens, or my goddess descending from the heavens, please return this crown to Patricia as soon as possible. That's right, this was a god equipment, a high-level god equipment from Patricia. Although it was 99% sealed, the only ability that wasn't sealed was the most dangerous part of this god equipment. As long as I activated this god equipment, it would be just as if Patricia herself was using it. I didn't know the specific power of this god equipment, but judging from the system's explanation, it would be far more powerful than a forbidden spell. And right now, I didn't only have one god equipment on me. I was now a full set of god equipment. The black-handed staff in my right hand had the emblem of a snake and dragon entwined on it. There were no magical wavelengths around it at all, and it faintly made others unable to detect its existence. However, I could say that this was the second most dangerous god equipment on me. Unfathomable Fate. High-level god equipment. Staff. Paired with this staff is a pair of presbyopic glasses. The sly and cunning god of fate often wears a cape, a staff, and a pair of presbyopic glasses. He pretends to be a fortune teller, a sage, or something similar. He hides in a dark corner and acts as some sort of guide to fate. If you listen to his guidance, everything will be fine, but if you don't, do you want to taste the feeling of eating noodles, burping, falling, and having all the bones in your body shatter? Actually, he doesn't even need to do it himself. This staff is more than capable of doing it. Ability 1, Seal. Ability 2, Seal. Ability 3, Fate is watching you. Choose a target and reduce their luck stat. The luck they lose will be added to you. This effect will last for 2 hours. This ability ignores all magic immunity and magic resistance. Even true gods are unable to resist it. Note, this ability can only be used once on a target. After that, the target will be immune to it for the rest of their lives. Ability 4, Fate is watching you. After using this ability, you will become the luckiest person in the entire world for 10 minutes. However, after using this ability for 3 hours, the additional luck you just obtained will become double misfortune. System reminder, Do not use this ability unless absolutely necessary. Changing your fate will only bring misfortune. The third effect was quite easy to understand, but the fourth effect was quite confusing. Plus, my system gave me a rare, serious explanation. In order to make sure that I didn't make a mistake when I needed to use this ability, I found a test subject and had him use it once, and then I understood everything. Cough. The test subject was a mercenary who loved gambling as much as his life. The moment he used this ability, I told him about its effects, and he impatiently ran off to gamble. In less than 5 minutes, he used only 2 copper coins to gamble and won the gold coins of a mansion. And then, 1 hour later, he accidentally stepped on a banana peel and shattered a noble colleague's family heirloom. While I was sighing at how ancient this mechanism was, I was even more astonished to find out that the family heirloom's value was exactly the same as 2 mansions. Actually, using this god equipment would definitely be a loss for you, but as long as you used it properly, it would be an excellent tool to turn the tables. My female companion didn't embarrass you, did she? Actually, I think it's better if you stand further away. You're too tall. Do you want me to wear high heels? Cough, I mean height shoes. In front of me was a tall and beautiful elf who was also wearing an extravagant dress. She was so tall that I had to raise my head to look at her. Her naturally proportioned body didn't look fat at all, and her elegant golden dress perfectly complemented her snow-white skin. Her overly extravagant dress seemed elegant and beautiful on her. Her soft back accentuated her beautiful curves, and her silky blonde hair reached all the way to the back of her ears. That golden glow that seemed like the sun was unique to the gold elves. Harloise lifted her dress and gave me a courteous bow. Today, she would be my female companion. We would be attending a banquet that Dragon City had prepared for us. Where did you find this dress? I thought that it was too small, but it's actually able to adjust itself. That's the god equipment's automatic adjustment function. Don't break it. No, don't dirty it. Otherwise, Bana will definitely give us an astronomical bill. That's right, this golden dress was also a god equipment. I had only asked her for a god equipment that represented her status, but she maliciously gave me her own dress and even demanded that I use it no matter what. However, I wasn't an idiot, and I unhesitatingly brought Harloise along as my female companion. Although this dress was extravagant and sexy to the point where it revealed all the parts that shouldn't be revealed, it was indeed an excellent god equipment. Bana's wealth barrier. Armor. God equipment. This is a piece of armor created from gold. Yes, it's a piece of armor, not an extravagant dress. Bana has never been a foolish and extravagant god. In fact, she's quite practical and thrifty. She used the symbol of wealth to create this armor that can change endlessly. As for why she's using the form of a dress in front of you, should I tell you that Princess Peach's drama is selling like hotcakes in the heavens? Your Highness, you're so embarrassing. Wealth connects the gods. This is a piece of armor created from the concept of wealth. The more money you have, the more additional defensive power this armor will provide. And if you're attacked, your wealth will decrease. System notification. In Bana's hands, even a main god would be unable to break through this armor's defense. In your hands, it's nothing more than a sexy dress, but it's definitely perfect. I recommend that you try it. System notification 1. Harloise's defensive power has already surpassed that of an entire country's ruler. So you understand. Squeeze out all of her money. A pet's pocket money is also its master's. Friendly reminder 2. If you put on the moonlight crown and a skirt, a certain narrow-minded goddess might be satisfied and calm down. Due to the efforts of a certain goddess who was good at holding grudges, the other gods didn't send me any god equipment or clothing. However, a certain god helplessly sent me the robe that I was most familiar with. It was a silver judge's robe. God equipment. Dignity of justice bound. Mage robe. Special effect 1. Self-judgment of a sinner. Sealed. Special effect 2. Iron mask of the judge. Sealed. Special effect 3. Soul equipment. Sealed. Special effect 4. Equipment. Sealed. Special effect 5. Womian's will. The user can summon Womian's divine power and use up to 3 true god divine arts per day. System notification. Can you not be so obvious when you cheat? It was a tradition for mages to wear mage robes as formal attire. The silver Wumian's robe was dignified and extravagant. It contained Wumian's divine might, so it would never be lacking in manners in any situation. Coupled with the moonlight crown and scepter, it seemed even more mysterious and dignified. Even the young archmage I saw in the mirror felt rather smug. Harloise smiled brightly as she coiled up her hair and placed her arm on her hand. At this moment, I didn't have the time to kiss her hand because I was currently biting an extremely showy white rose in my mouth. This wasn't because I suddenly wanted to cosplay as a Pisces. It was because this was the most dangerous god equipment that I had ever borrowed. That's right, Fate's scepter was far more dangerous than the moonlight crown. However, this seemingly ordinary rose was capable of making any god stop in their tracks. LS White Rose. Mystical item, top-level god equipment. When the highest god of death, Ale, smiles at a certain god, that god will probably pee his pants in fright. And if Ale flashes a white rose at a certain god, I personally recommend that the god quickly end his or her life. Effect. Causes the chosen target to instantly die. System notification. Yep, it's that simple. There are no other effects. But trust me, even a main god wouldn't be willing to be chosen by this rose. As for why I foolishly kept the rose's stem in my mouth, it was because Ale said that this would allow the god equipment to get used to my aura. That way, it wouldn't kill me when I attacked. However, I kept feeling like something was wrong. A certain shady organization. He actually didn't wear my dress. I spent so much effort designing it. Puffed. He really kept the rose in his mouth. He really believed me. Hurry up and record it in my memory crystal. A mysterious evil intent caused me to shiver. However, it was already time for me to head out. Of course, I wouldn't dress up in such a flashy manner for no reason. Compared to the effects of these god equipment, the most important thing was the fact that a true god of the Ale faction had lent me these god equipment of origin. This represented the bottomless support of the entire Ale faction for me. And in the upcoming battles against the dragons and titans, these god equipment would become my powerful trump cards. From now on, we would no longer be mercenaries that they could casually hire. Instead, we would be partners of equal status. And in order to prove my trump cards, I could only choose to appear in such a high-profile manner. Is it too much? Compared to the grand plan I'm about to carry out, this appearance probably isn't enough. Chapter 408. Who's Roland? Some kind of new delicacy? I've never heard of him. I think he's a descendant of the Mist Kingdom, right? Do you know about the Mist Kingdom? It was destroyed more than 300 years ago. He was the prince at the time. In that case, I do have some recollection of him. Has the Mist King's inheritance been lost? That really makes me sigh. Back in the day, I had a good relationship with him. The Northlands were even better at fighting than the barbarians. What a pity. No matter what happened back then, he was just a mortal. What's there to pity about? That's true. Did you hear? San Lang said that the Eternal Thunder people are especially delicious when paired with a special type of pickled vegetable. Would you like to try it together? When Dragon City officially held a welcoming banquet and invited a mortal to attend, such conversations were common throughout Dragon City. This was inevitable. After all, for the prideful dragons, when was the last time they treated a mortal with formal courtesy? And for the immemorial dragons, it was normal for them to sleep for 100 years. An existence that was only slightly more than 300 years ago was no different from a young brat who had just made a name for himself. Right now, the immemorial gold dragon Horus was having a headache. As the highest-ranked elder in Dragon City, he decided to invite the Mage Country's special envoy with the highest level of courtesy. The other elders began to complain, saying things like how embarrassing. He's just a human. Why invite him? If he wants to come, then come. If he doesn't, then scram. Enough. You'll understand once you see him. Also, before he could finish speaking, Horus discovered to his astonishment that not only was his voice unable to transmit, everything before him had stopped moving. His consciousness was still present, but his body was unable to move a single finger. Not only that, even the tiny water droplets and dust in the air had stopped moving. The next instant, everything returned to normal, as if everything that had just happened was nothing more than a nightmare. What happened? Horace stood up while the dragons were astonished at the abnormal scene that had just occurred. They should be here already. It would seem that there are many who are as short-sighted and look down on mortals as you are. I hope that they haven't caused any major trouble. Half an hour ago, when the Borealis slowly entered the Yak Canyon, where Dragon City was located, we were surrounded by countless enthusiastic spectators. Before the dragons attempted to attack us, the blue dragon who was leading the way helped us clear the path. The mountains on both sides were all strangely shaped rocks. From the three-dimensional perspective view of the bridge, the huge battleship looked like a small toy, and the giant dragons around it looked like swallows. There are more than 3,700 dragons within range, as well as an equal number of dragon whelps and dragon elders. Many locations are even black on the scouting device. They must have been forcefully covered by the concept of unfathomable, as expected of the three great gathering places for dragons. The radar that was infused with this world's sound magic had excellent performance. The only downside was that its technology and industrial level were still lacking, and it was already larger than 2 rooms. However, it wouldn't be a problem if it was used on a warship. In fact, we've already entered Dragon City's territory. Be prepared. Outside the window, curious dragons kept flying past the battleship's edge. I was worried that the cannon's controllers wouldn't be able to control their hands. In front of the gigantic Borealis battleship, the dragons also became much smaller, and they naturally restrained their arrogance. This also helped me avoid the awkwardness of being surrounded by onlookers. So, this is one of the 3 great dragon cities? It's much smaller than I expected, but it looks really valuable. At the end of the mountain range, there was a castle that seemed to be carved out of white jade. It was quite eye-catching, and if I wasn't mistaken, this was indeed the valuable Yalong jade. Although this rare stone, jade, wasn't a magical metal that could be used to forge equipment, its value was no less than mithril of the same size. It was also quite suitable for the rich to use as a jade bed to show off their wealth. However, to be able to use this to build a house, should I say that as expected of dragons? It's just a historical site. Every year, the guards on duty have to deal with a dozen young dragons who try to steal it. These young dragons are willing to do anything for the sake of the upcoming breeding season or to decorate their dragon nests. Copper Dragon Evelyn naturally accompanied me. After discussing some things, our trust in each other deepened significantly. At the very least, there were many things that I didn't need to intentionally avoid. This wasn't my first time visiting Dragon City, so I had a certain understanding of the unique existence known as Dragon City. Dragon City wasn't a gathering place for dragons. It would be quite rare for even 1% of the Dragon City's residents to reside in Dragon City. Although this sounded inconceivable, it was only natural when considering how large dragons were and how territorial they were. Adult dragons would typically have their own territories. They would have magical beasts and intelligent creatures as servants in their territories. They would live like emperors, so why would they come to a city to be a resident? In the eyes of most dragons, Dragon City was a government organization that was used by powerful individuals to argue with each other. It was also a temporary market that ordinary dragons used to trade their personal items. In order to avoid being recruited by powerful individuals, they would never choose to report to Dragon City unless it was absolutely necessary. The underground Dragon City was similar. However, due to the cruel living environment, the underground Dragon City's Dragon King's authority was much more centralized. Meanwhile, in the surface Dragon City, even the leaders of the underground Dragon City were usually all elders, or there was an incomprehensible system of rotating leaders. However, every social system had its own reason for existing. Actually, such a chaotic and inefficient system was a necessary choice for the dragon's current system. Every single dragon branch had their own personalities. If you had copper dragons represent the blue dragons, that would basically be nonsense. It would already be nice if they didn't start fighting each other. Unlike the underground Dragon City, which only had black dragons and red dragons, there were far too many branches in the surface Dragon City. Every branch hoped that someone would represent their interests, so it was only natural that everyone would have the right to speak. Actually, some powerful branches had multiple elders, while some branches had no elders at all. Everything depended on the dragon's tradition. Their fists did the talking. Since they were far too large, most Dragon City residents would choose to do business in Dragon City in their smaller forms. If they were still unable to transform, they would complete their own transactions outside of Dragon City. As I strolled through Dragon City, I didn't see many adult dragons. Apart from the young dragons that were taken care of by their mothers, the rest were all strange humanoid creatures that had their own draconic might. Elves and humans made up the majority of the population, while beastmen and dwarves were also common. I even saw a few ogres and ogres. However, the strange thing was that the ogres were actually respected by the other dragons. Adult dragons will choose a species' physical appearance as their smaller form. This form's physical appearance and species are unable to be changed. Back when the elves were in power, we often interacted with the elves. Naturally, elven appearances were the most common. This is the era of humans, and most humans are young dragons. As for ogres, the most obvious example would be Little Red and her mother. Little Red's mother was a red-haired elf, while Little Red was a black-haired human. Old dragons from the Great Demon's generation? No wonder. From a certain standpoint, the physical appearance of Dragon City was a representation of the rise and fall of the various species in the world of He. Seeing that more than 50% of the dragons in Dragon City had elven appearances, I could only sigh at how powerful the elven civilization was. However, I also felt a mysterious sense of sorrow. After all, the ancient gold elves who had transformed into gold elves always seemed like they were the real deal. It was hard to say whether or not the gold elves next to me were the real deal. That was why even though Harloise still had a calm smile on her face, I wasn't surprised at all by the surging emotions I felt through our soul connection. And so, I secretly patted her on the shoulder. And when we observe others, we will naturally become the object of observation. Since we were attending a welcoming party, we didn't bring any attendants with us. Since the dragons here didn't have the habit of using carriages, we naturally chose to walk as well. On the way, my god equipment didn't conceal its elemental fluctuations at all. Not only did it dazzle the dragon's eyes, it also caused quite a few dragons to follow us. Although it was the most basic rule in Dragon City to not have any conflicts, the moment that an outsider left might be the moment that he or she would be robbed. They're all young dragons, right? Haha, youngsters don't know any better. They'll understand after suffering a few times. We completely ignored the dragons following us. It was obvious that the ones following us were all young dragons. Apart from the fact that they were about to enter the breeding season and hoped to obtain more wealth in order to decorate their dragon nest and attract more mates, it was also because the older dragons knew that there were people that they could offend and people that they couldn't. Anyone who dared to leave their god equipment hanging outside wouldn't be afraid of being robbed by others. Not even the myths had ever seen such a powerful existence. Even if such an existence seemed weak, how could they possibly be offended? Suddenly, our vision darkened as a skinny, white-skinned elf transformed into a white dragon right in front of me. Should I say that not all dragons are smart enough? Or should I say that this is as expected of a retarded white dragon? Dragon descendant, hand over the treasures in your possession, and I, Lord Hamist, shall become your new master. Oh my, he actually thinks that I'm a half-dragon? Dragons were used to using dragon descendants and half-dragons as servants and slaves. That was why ordinary dragon descendants didn't have high statuses among dragons. It seemed that my dragon bloodline aura made him believe that I was a half-dragon who was subservient to true dragons. I smiled evilly. Then I saw that someone seemed to intend to go first, but several evil dragons simultaneously jumped out from behind me. There were blue, green, white, and even bright red dragons. It would seem that there were quite a few red dragons sneaking up on the ground. You little brats. This slave escaped with Lord Hamist's treasures. Do you intend to steal Lord Hamist's treasures? The gigantic white dragon's mouth carried a foul stench as it swept its tail and pushed the group of little dragons away. It seemed that it was actually a rather old, ancient white dragon. However, the fact that it was able to survive until now without being killed by anyone was probably due to its luck of staying in the dragon world for such a long time. Hamas seemed to be quite clever as he directly described this as his master hunting down an escaped slave in order to avoid the unwritten rules of Dragon City. By the time the dragon's manager arrived, this matter would probably have already been resolved. Not even the victim would be found, and no one would bother making trouble for an immemorial white dragon for the sake of a few unfamiliar, low-level dragon descendants. Seeing that a dispute had occurred here, and that Hamas, who was rather infamous, was involved, the bystanders all started discussing amongst themselves. However, not a single one of them tried to stop this. Instead, they all seemed to be enjoying a good show with all sorts of ill intentions. Why aren't they fighting yet? Hamas is probably going to be unlucky this time. He was just punished a few days ago. Isn't that really a god equipment? Some dragons were probably hoping to see the white dragon fight to the death, while others were prepared to see the white dragon suffer. Some were even considering the possibility of attacking first. However, no matter how I looked at it, not a single one of them had any kind intentions. I shook my head as I was becoming less and less fond of dragons. Although I had never been fond of these large lizards, no matter which species of dragon they were. Oh my, you really know how to talk. Evelyn, is this how Dragon City treats its guests? Does he not recognize you? For dragons, their human forms are meaningless. He only recognizes the three-headed magic dragon Evelyn. How could he possibly recognize a young brass dragon like me? In that case, you don't intend to carry out your duties as an elder? My older sister is an elder, but I'm not. Besides, Roland, don't you just happen to need a monkey to make an example out of? Since he's already jumping around, wouldn't it be bad if I beat him to it? I lower my head and touch my hat. A black light flashed on my staff as I shrugged. It's already boring for you to say it out loud. I still want to enjoy this monkey show a little longer. I looked all around me. The evil dragons seemed to have surrounded us. Their open whispers and malicious intentions made me quite annoyed. How noisy. Law incantation. Silence. The image of a silver-masked man on my mage robe flashed for an instant, and a faint silver light of law exploded forth like a halo. This was the equivalent of Wumian's personally casting a law incantation. The entire world was forcefully frozen. An ordinary law incantation, silence, would probably only be able to silence everyone in the court. However, it seemed that the power of my law incantation far surpassed my expectations. The result of my divine power strengthening was that this ordinary, first circle forbidden spell spread throughout the entire Dragon City. At that instant, the entire world became silent. The malicious words were all gone as the dragons lost the ability to speak. Above Dragon City, the flying dragons lost the ability to spread their wings, causing them to fall down like dumplings. However, the law incantation would probably end before they fell to their deaths. I smiled evilly as I glanced at the panicking Hamas and young dragons. Law incantation, judgment. However, this time it was the light of judgment. The surrounding dragons who attempted to kill and rob Dragon City were all dyed red. They were criminals who had been caught red-handed by the law enforcers. It would seem that Dragon City's public security is quite average. I could see that there were several large red zones as well. Wumian's divine power had once again caused this low-level law incantation to spread throughout the entire city. No matter how foolish the white dragon was, Hamas knew that he had run into an iron wall this time. However, before he could do anything, I raised my staff. Law incantation, judgment. Your Highness Roland, wait a moment. It seemed that my law incantation had caused such a commotion that it startled the dragon's elders who were waiting for us. The sight of a group of dragons running over was quite a shocking sight. However, I shook my head and directly finished the law incantation I was casting. Law incantation, judgment strike. I lightly touched the white dragon's heel with my black staff. Hammast's gigantic dragon head paused in surprise for a moment before widening his eyes and opening his mouth in disbelief. He looked towards the dragon's elders for help. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Hammast didn't even get a chance to scream before his head exploded like a firework. His blood splattered all over the street. Of course, the dragon's elders' faces were also covered in blood. I smiled in satisfaction as I looked at their ashen faces. Nice to meet you, esteemed elders of the dragons. I am Roland Mist. What a delightful welcoming ceremony. You're truly creative to find someone like this to welcome me. Chapter 409. Killing someone on the streets of Dragon City, and even splattering the dragon's elders' faces with their blood. Was that arrogant? Of course it was arrogant. How could I not be arrogant when I killed someone on the streets and even yelled at the police? No matter if the person who was killed deserved it or not, this was indeed a slap in the face to the local authorities. No matter if the elders were elves or beastmen, they all paused in surprise for a moment before their expressions turned ashen, and it seemed like they were about to explode. Prince Roland, could that be Lord ALS rose in your hands? As for me, I quietly played with the white rose in my hand. Every time I saw Ale use this rose to show off his popularity, I really wanted to steal it and play a game of she loves me, she doesn't love me with the rose petals. Cough, cough. I seem to have accidentally exposed something again. This time, I didn't feel like I was trying to act cool and slap him in the face anymore. I finally met someone who knows what's good for me. This time, my friends were worried that I would be bitten by a mad dog, so they lent me some toys. It would seem that they were right. He looked at the splattered brains in disgust, and his attitude of disdain was clear on his face. As expected, there are many mad dogs here. I didn't even try to hide my disdain, as if the dragon corpse before me was some sort of filthy thing. This disdain instantly transformed into flames that destroyed all reason. As I looked at the ashen-faced and red-faced elders, I felt as if I could hear the sound of my reason snapping. How dare you? The fiery-tempered blue dragon directly revealed his true form. However, he was stopped by one of his own. The gold dragon Horus directly stopped him. Don't be impulsive. That white rose is Death God ALS personal god equipment. Do you want to die? The blue dragon elder paused in surprise for a moment, but then immediately stopped. Of course, he knew who Ale was, and he also knew that he would only be sending himself to his death if he went up. However, since he had already stepped up, wouldn't he lose all face if he gave in? Only now did he have the free time to size up Halos. When he saw that Halos was covered in god equipment, he could only inwardly complain. Then, the tense situation suddenly stopped. A gust of cold wind blew past, and the blue dragon elder's face was filled with embarrassment. He didn't want to charge forward and give up his life, but if he retreated in front of everyone's eyes, he would lose all face. However, in the underworld, reputation was sometimes even more important than life itself. Just as he gritted his teeth and decided to gamble on his chances of survival and whether or not Evelyn would dare to kill him in Dragon City, Evelyn suddenly jumped out at this critical moment to act as a mediator. As expected of the undying Roland on the Calamity rankings, ranked 20th on the Calamity rankings. Right, everyone, this is Her Highness Harloise. She also seems to be on the Calamity rankings. I haven't congratulated the two of you on your recent rise in the rankings. Even I had to agree with Evelyn's words. What a great way to go downstairs. She's no ordinary person. She's a calamity, so it's fine even if you retreat. Evelyn also helped me get out of this embarrassing situation. After all, I only wanted to beat down the Blue Dragon Elder's arrogance. I didn't come all the way here just to make him my enemy. Killing a bandit who came to rob me and killing the bandit's leader on the spot were two completely different concepts. Evelyn's identity was quite special as well. The dragons' elders all knew who she was. Since she was one of them, it was quite acceptable for her to speak up for her. Then, a certain blue dragon elder returned to his human form with a stern expression. He then stomped his feet and disappeared without a trace. He didn't have the face to stay here any longer. Even so, he wouldn't be able to regain his face today. It was likely that we had become enemies. Welcome, welcome, my two esteemed guests. Our welcoming banquet has long since been prepared. If there's anything else, we can discuss it after the banquet. At this point, what else could I say? I could only think of a way to ease the atmosphere. Although I still had a cold expression of disdain as the dragons glared at me the entire way to the banquet, I was actually quite warmed up inside. From a certain standpoint, this was what I had been looking forward to the most. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for us to negotiate. From the very start, the dragons didn't take us seriously at all. Our request for reinforcements from the mage country was like trying to find a cure on Baidu. Our mages can't do it, and human mages probably can't do it either. But there's no harm in trying. In the Titan Giants' eyes, their only enemies and opponents were the Titans and Giants. Only the Titans and Giants were existences on the same level as the Titan Giants. As for humans, perhaps the Titan Giants would respect powerful individuals. But when it came to matters of the Titan Giant species, the Titan Giants would always try to suppress the Titan Giants. This was also the foundational reason why I had delayed my arrival to Dragon City, even though I had already entered Dragon World. If I had come here so easily, not only would the dragons not take me seriously, the dragons probably wouldn't even give me a chance to negotiate. Can't do it? Can you? If you can, then do it. We'll pay you. If you can't, then you'll just have to go somewhere else. Yep, it's another way of saying please scram. That was why I had to do something, even if it was possible for us to sit down and negotiate. Even if I hadn't met that foolish dragon, I would have taken the initiative to cause trouble. The dragons' personality? They're nothing more than wild beasts who bully the weak and fear the strong. It's fine if you say that it's the law of the jungle, but is there a fundamental difference between the two? According to my understanding of the dragons, if you beg for mercy or mercy, they'll completely ignore you. If you want to negotiate with them on equal terms, they'll laugh at you for being foolish. If you really want to make friends with them and negotiate with them on equal terms, beat them up first. Some people agree with my opinion. The harder you beat them up and the more pain they'll feel, the more they'll treat you as someone important. The friendlier you are, the more they'll treat you as nothing important. As for this immemorial white dragon who had come to me to be killed as an example to others, he had already been tacitly forgotten by everyone. If he didn't show up, I would have to think of other ways to cause trouble for him. This was also why I had borrowed a set of god equipment. I had the intention of wiping Dragon City off the map if it was necessary, and then negotiating with them. After all, what I hoped to obtain from the negotiation was far too important to anyone. Dragon World, or perhaps I should say a part of Dragon World, is our ultimate goal. Only with Dragon World will it be possible for our next plan to be realized. This was the ultimate goal that I had revealed to my subordinates in Ale. Doubtlessly, the dragons had treated Dragon World as their personal property from the very start. If we wanted to take a tooth from the tiger's mouth, how could we not be forceful? The dragons had strengthened the Titan Giant seal only because the moment the Titan Giants broke free from the seal, this sealed dimension would collapse. If it weren't for this reason, why would the dragons be willing to fight to the death against the Titan Giants and the Titan Giants? In that case, although from a certain standpoint, we had the same interests as the dragons, and neither of us wanted the Titan Giants to revive and cause the entire dimension to be destroyed, we were actually more like thieves who had their hands in the same pocket. After all, neither of us was the true master of this dimension. Of course, just relying on negotiation would be far from enough. That was why I had prepared many little tricks. Sometimes, when I'm unscrupulous, even I'm afraid of myself. If you really do as you please, you'll definitely be able to enter the top 10 calamity rankings if word gets out. I was standing in a corner of the banquet hall. There was no one else around me. Due to the incident just now, although I was in a way the main character of this banquet, the host had obviously disliked me. What was surprising yet reasonable was that Harlois had become the main character of this banquet. Many people kept inviting this beautiful gold elf princess to dance with them, expressing their regret for the Gold Elf Empire's former glory and their disdain for the ungrateful High Elves. Although the Gold Elf Empire at its peak might not have been stronger than the dragons, ordinary dragons would definitely show respect to the Gold Elf Empire. Many of the current Gold Elf elders had come from that generation. From a certain standpoint, Harlow's status was actually quite noble. Even dragons would have to lower their heads before her. It was just that she was previously an undead, which prevented her from interacting with the dragons. However, I could only listen to these words. It would be impossible for the dragons to actually demand justice for the Gold Elves. Since they had friendly relations with the Gold Elf Empire in the past, it was only natural that they would have friendly relations with the Kingdom of the Elves now as well. It wasn't like they needed to pay any money to express their sympathy or reprimand. I leisurely looked at Harlow's, who was surrounded by the crowd, and chatted with her through our spiritual connection. At the same time, my attention was focused on the banquet before me. Could this be the stinger meat of a scorpion dragon? It's said to be super delicious. Wow, there's even ancient elven fruit wine. Judging from the smell, it seems to be mixed with fruit juice. I really want to drink it. Unfortunately, no matter how much I wanted to drink it, I was unable to do so right now. Right now, I had to do my best to wear an unpredictable smile and a body full of god equipment while standing in a corner like a cool decoration. Although nobody was looking for me, countless gazes were constantly looking at me. If I exposed my current emotions, it would cause a series of problems in the future. Of course, the dragons wouldn't be too rude. When the dragon descendant musician at the banquet switched to a gentler song, Horus, who was currently the most authoritative elder, stood in front of me and did his best to smile. Even though I couldn't read minds, I could tell that he was cursing under his smile. He was probably cursing, "Why did you bring a body full of god equipment here for no reason?" Yet, he didn't dare to offend me too much. After all, I wasn't just talking about the Mage Country. ALS faction was far more useful than the Mage Country's faction. However, since he smiled at me without saying anything, I naturally smiled back at him without saying anything. Hee hee. And then I fell silent. Cough, His Highness Roland. What do you think about the Titan Giant Seal? All right then. Horus forced himself to change the topic. However, he immediately started talking about the most important part of our discussion. It was obvious that this elder Horus wasn't very good at negotiating. Or perhaps, as a dragon's, he didn't really need any negotiating skills. All he needed to do was pressure me. And then I smiled. I loved new negotiators like him the most. They were sincere, easy to fool. Easy to communicate with. That was why I casually started talking about how to scare him. We do indeed have some conclusions. These are the conclusions of the Truth Symposium, and they've also been confirmed by Ale. Their accuracy should be trustworthy. I paused mid-sentence. As I expected, countless ears were perking up to eavesdrop on me. This matter concerned every dragon's personal interests, so of course they would pay attention to it. The Titan Giant Seal will be broken sooner or later, and Dragon World will definitely collapse. Chapter 410. What would happen when multiple chaos main gods appeared on the same battlefield? Everything would descend into chaos and fear. All dimensional laws would become chaotic, and as the chaos main gods went all out, the collapse of order would become even more obvious. There was not a single ray of light in the sky. Even those with night vision wouldn't be able to see more than 100 meters away. Everything would be devoured by the Light Eater. There was no need for dark clouds to exist. Dimensional cracks were torn open one after another. It was likely that nobody knew what was behind those dimensional cracks. After all, the unlucky ones who were devoured still hadn't returned yet. The laws of gravity were rewritten. Gigantic rocks suddenly rose up and then suddenly fell down. The apocalyptic scene from the legends was right before everyone's eyes. Mortals returned to an ancient battle between gods. This land had experienced far too many battles. The dimensional laws here had long since been broken. Unlike the Battle of the Hades, where the gods of the Hades maintained the stability of the battlefield, this area had long since lost the protection of the Earth God. In such a battlefield, just surviving would be a glorious achievement worthy of being recorded in the myths. But right now, surviving was truly difficult. The Bronze War god smiled in delight as he swung his heavy sword. His sword shattered numerous mountains and city walls. Mortals wouldn't attract his attention at all, but any unlucky person who was within range of his charge would have no chance of escaping. Those who were trampled to death would be the luckiest. They would die far too quickly and painlessly. Those who were enveloped by his domain of wrath would sink into an eternal battle, killing and being killed until the very last drop of their blood. This wasn't any sort of domain ability or supernatural ability. It was just that when Donati's sank into a berserk battle, all intelligent creatures around him would be affected by his emotions and fall into a never-ending berserk battle just like him. The black-winged demon in the sky also gave up on the prey before him. He glided through the sky, seeming slow but actually quite fast as he circled around Donati's. As for whether his prey was me or Donati's, it was likely that even he himself didn't know. That was because every single word of Donati's the Deceiver would be lacking in authenticity and credibility. A pincer attack from two main gods? I'm truly honored. I smiled wryly as I lightly gripped my holy light sword and released a blinding light. My dawn holy light sword that dispelled the darkness became the only source of light. The blinding light inadvertently revealed my boiling fighting spirit. How long has it been since I've been able to fight to my heart's content without considering anything? Perhaps I was influenced by Donati's fighting spirit, or perhaps it was because I had nowhere else to retreat. I actually felt my blood boil for a moment. But in the main god's hands, worlds apart, worlds apart, worlds apart, everything was different. Worlds apart in the hands of a main god. The instantaneous change in perspective was now meaningless. My intuition told me that Donati's was already standing right in front of me. That thunderous roar that made my ears ring was only the sound of the wind caused by his sword swinging. My ears and eyes had lost their function, but my intuition and instincts were furiously warning me that a fatal threat was right above my head. Yet, I could only slowly mutter in a low voice. Equal. The tiny lightsaber wasn't even comparable to a toothpick in front of the war god's super heavy sword. However, the instant that the two swords clashed, the entire world could hear the sound of thunder. The lightless battlefield was illuminated by white light. This was a scorching flash that far surpassed the brightness of the sun in the daytime. After everyone lost their light, they were once again blinded by the excessive light. Thanks to that flash of light, everyone witnessed an inconceivable scene. Even the main god-devourer, Barbarat, who was in the middle of a frenzied slaughter, was so shocked that his jaw dropped. The invincible god of war was like an unlucky guy who had been hit by a giant truck. He flew backward like a bullet and rolled in the sky. Then, he landed on the ground and continued rolling, smashing through two fortresses and a huge mountain. The undefeatable war god was sent flying as if he were a newbie who had just been hit by a giant truck. The invincible god of war was like a rookie who had just come out of the oven. He was directly sent flying like a baseball. Even Donati's was unable to handle the frightening power. Even though he was already rolling on the ground to reduce the impact, he was still unable to move for quite a while. But judging from Barty's increasingly fervent gaze, this long-forgotten pain actually stimulated his desire to fight. Ha ha ha. As expected of Roland. That battle against the Hades back then was so fun, and now you've given me another surprise. Let's go again. Donati's tried to use his arms to stand up, but he failed twice. Only now did he discover that his body, which was made of adamantine, was also unable to handle the power of this attack. His entire arm was now covered in cracks. My maniacal laughter could be heard from half the battlefield, but I didn't receive any response. That was because I was currently doing my best to dig myself out from the ground. Tui, 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 it's all sand. I half knelt on the ground with my golden, holy sword stabbed into the ground with blinding wings of light surrounding it. I helplessly looked at my right arm and right hand, which should have been holding my sword. I only have half of my body left. Isn't this too ridiculous? There was nothing on the right side of my body where my arm should have been. There's no need to worry about me cosplaying as Yonghua, because half of my shoulder had disappeared without a trace. With such a heavy injury, I should have died already. However, my wound was mysteriously covered in a faint white light, and not a single drop of blood flowed out. As expected, I shouldn't have foolishly faced you head-on. I was forced to use my trump card so quickly. That's such a waste. I was even intending to use it against you in the future when I wanted to trade blows with you. Dawn's holy sword's wings of light unfurled in front of me. The Lord of Thunder's shadow furiously flapped his wings in an attempt to fly away, but finally calmed down. Meanwhile, more and more light gathered on my wound. I no longer had the time to worry about my wound. The black-winged Sophocles was about to begin his second round of attacks. I had originally thought that Donati's pitiful state would cause the cautious Sophocles to retreat yet again. However, this only stimulated Sophocles' vicious nature as a demon. Even though Sophocles' golden armor that was covered in flashing magical runes seemed rather laughable, the vicious expression on his face revealed his determination. It would be worth it even if he was seriously injured if he could take this chance to deal with such a terrifying opponent. When the light on the right side of my body dissipated, my right arm and body returned to normal. I unfurled my wings of light, picked up my holy sword, and flew towards the wind. You want to beat me up while I'm down? Try to show off your own strength first. Aff you. I'm Sophocles. This time, my light sword and heavy sword didn't clash. My wings of light and the gigantic demon slowly approached each other. Darkness and light. TSK. Just as we were about to clash, I flew downwards while he flew upwards. Both of us missed each other. Why didn't you dodge if you had the guts? What a cowardly mortal. As expected, you don't have the courage to fight me head-on. Sophocles couldn't see through my ability just now, so he didn't dare to fight me head-on. I also felt that Sophocles definitely wasn't the type to fight me head-on. He definitely had some tricks up his sleeve. Huh, I've already seen through your tricks. Isn't it just some light-absorbing armor from the Haletum generation? I played with it so much that I don't even want it anymore. Did you get it at the Sky Tower last time? How is that possible? How could you possibly know? I've already buried everyone who knows about this. And now, it was my turn to be rendered speechless. I casually told him that I was telling the truth. I also carefully kept my distance from Sophocles. Last time, I saw that he was seriously injured. He had even taken out the Solar Energy Storage Armor X blueprint to create his own armor for himself. This rare item that the Haletum generation invented was the natural enemy of light. Although it was called a solar energy storage armor, it was actually capable of forcefully absorbing all types of light. Back when I was looking at the blueprint in the ruins, I had exclaimed that this item was the natural enemy of holy light. If it wasn't for the fact that the materials needed were so difficult to obtain, I would have even created one to defeat the Holy Light Church by myself. Cough, cough. Let's focus on figuring out how a powerful demon managed to obtain so many light element materials. Sophocles didn't dare to directly attack, but someone else did. Not only that, there were two of them. Donatis's gigantic sword and bloody scythe simultaneously attacked Sophocles. Donatis had already arrived in front of me while laughing maniacally. Seeing how exciting the battle was, he unhesitatingly gave up on his wailing toy as he smiled viciously. This time, Donatis was being ganged up on by three main gods, all of whom were seriously on guard. It was likely that no matter who won or lost, this battle would go down in history. My previous attack was no longer usable. As the first mortal to be ganged up on and killed by multiple main gods, I could now die in peace. As if I could only helplessly sigh as I faced the pressure of being ganged up on. I tossed aside my holy sword. Hey, brothers, someone wants to gang up on me and bully me with numbers. What do you say? There was no response. All right then. It seemed that talking nicely to these bastards was useless. You're the one, little fire dragon. Wondrous frog seed. Two clouds of black mist appeared in the direction his arm was pointing. One blocked Donatis, and the other blocked Barbarat. Donatis's gigantic black sword was blocked by a lightning spear, while his bloody scythe was broken by a spiked mace. Donatis was sent flying again, and this time, that gigantic devourer, main god, also accompanied him. Who's the little red dragon? I am the creator goddess' most beloved eldest son, the Titan. Who's the wondrous frog seed? I am the apex of despair and regret, Hymer. Chapter 411. HE's New Year's first news summary. So it wasn't written by the fairies? It's a new journal jointly created by San Antonio, the Mage Country, and several other major countries. Just the number of copies sold in each country is astonishing. Whoever controls public opinion will have the right to speak. Nobody's an idiot these days. This morning, a blue dragon suddenly flew over the campsite. Apart from the invitation, there was also this journal in the gift bag it threw down. Although it wasn't printed in color, the paper was excellent, the wording was exquisite, and the content was well illustrated. Let me see what important news it is that requires a high-speed delivery. I immediately closed the journal the moment I flipped to the first page. Ultraman fighting against small monsters? Doesn't that sound a little wrong? The headlines already seemed ridiculous, but the silly cat scurried out from a corner. Let me see, what Ultraman? It's obviously the cloud giants that vanished from the world have returned to the mortal world. In the battle between Bardi and the Holy Church, they viciously taught the dragons a lesson. Halen's army was forced to retreat after a bitter battle. At cloud giants? There are actually cloud giants in the mortal plane. I had to say, that glowing giant really did seem like the legendary Ultraman, the Giant of Light. The dragons that were being beaten up by the cloud giants really did seem like small monsters that were shouting shameful lines. Cloud giants were one of the strongest subspecies of the giant species. They were known as the Titan's favored children. Cloud giants were the tallest of all giants and had the most extravagant appearances. It was said that all of them were handsome men and beautiful women who wore extravagant clothing. They were also born with natural talent for controlling clouds and mist and were skilled at learning divine arts. However, most people were known for their outstanding talent in art and music. Many majestic palaces were built by them, and bards would sing about their works and treat them as their teachers. Of course, since the giants were also the most intelligent, they could produce mages, priests, and other combat job classes. They were also one of the few giants that were skilled at organizing and fighting in groups. Perhaps they weren't as skilled as the lava giants, who were skilled in martial arts, but a group of cloud giants would definitely be the scariest of all giants. It had been a long time since anyone had seen cloud giants in the mortal plane. It was said that they had left the mortal plane in order to escape from the curse of stupidity. However, it seemed that these legendary peace-loving and art-loving giants had still made a decision under the summons of their ancestors. If it was a cloud giant, Halen's defeat would be understandable. Not only that, they were able to remotely control the outside world while sealed. We need to be even more vigilant against the Titans. But the most eye-catching part was a sentence written in red at the back of this article. P.S. Legend has it that angels appeared in this battle. However, according to our investigations, they were only mercenaries from the Wing tribe who voluntarily participated in this battle. The despicable Holy Church used these Wing tribe members as angels in order to shake the Bardi warriors' resolve. Angels have appeared, yes, but didn't the higher-ups say that it's the Wing tribe? Considering the political stance of this magazine. Yep, since it was jointly published by the royalty, they naturally wouldn't go along with the Holy Church's wishes. If it said that the angels were the Wing tribe, I felt that it was more likely that the angels were angels. After all, the difference between the Wing tribe and the angels was like the difference between a hen and a phoenix. The former were only humans that could fly, while the latter had an ancient bloodline comparable to dragons. It would be far too obvious if they fought on the battlefield. Considering how angels had a high status in the hearts of ordinary humans in Aichi, they were extremely positive characters in all sorts of myths and legends, and also acted as the gods' messengers. If angels really appeared on the Holy Church's side, it would naturally be a severe blow to the newly risen Church of pure holy light. And if angels appeared on the Holy Church's side, it would also cause ordinary warriors to waver. Not to mention, angel warriors were generally quite strong in combat. In that case, if the Holy Church's expeditionary army had the help of angels and cloud giants, Halen's defeat would be completely understandable. Are the enemies pure angels and art-loving cloud giants? We have so many undead and evil dragons on our side, as well as dark elves, evil underground creatures, and greedy goblins. Why do I feel like we're the antagonists? You just realized? The enemy faction has cloud giants and angels. I'm afraid that our morale will be affected. It doesn't matter. Race isn't a righteous reason, nor is it a reason to slaughter. Why should we be troubled by the opinions of those idiots? I wasn't worried about our side's morale. It was that a large portion of the angel tribe had already become the Order True God subordinates. Since they were participating in a mortal battle, it was highly likely that some god had decided to interfere. And based on my understanding of the Holy Church's fanatics, when they feel that they've received the God's favor and feel that their actions represent the God's will, even the most vile actions will become holy. Even the most evil intentions will be viewed as the God's benevolence. Rather than believing in the logic of fanatics, it's better to believe that villains whose hands are covered in blood will voluntarily repent. Speak like a human. A great massacre and purge. Then, they'll confidently prepare to fight all the way to the Bardi capital. They'll furiously increase their troops and force other countries to join the Holy Light Army. They'll escalate this small-scale battle into an Armageddon. I believe that they're capable of doing such a thing. That's far too direct. But I have to say, the more I think about it, the more likely it seems. This is completely the Holy Church that we understand. If the Holy Church appears victorious and uses the name of the Holy Light to summon other major countries that believe in the Holy Light to participate in this battle, it might directly escalate into a world war. There were some things that Harloise didn't say out loud, but we all understood. Bardi was a mega empire, after all. Bardi had accumulated an astonishing amount of resources and wealth. It was obvious that Bardi was on the losing end of the war against Bardi. Those greedy predators now had a righteous excuse to attack Bardi. How could they possibly miss out on such a good opportunity? I put down this journal and fell into a state of confusion. At the same time as the game's history, the entire world had entered the Vulture of War expansion pack. The elves and beastmen were at war, and the major countries were fighting each other for the sake of ambition. I originally thought that I had avoided the worst possible outcome, but I never expected that the game's history would be so unpredictable. I actually mysteriously returned to the beginning. No, the situation has already changed. The Bardi Empire in the game's history is destined to be destroyed. No matter how it develops, the ending won't be any worse than this. Besides, it's only a local war right now. It might not come to that. I just need to hurry up. I opened up this journal again, intending to take a look at what else had happened recently. Asterisk thud. Asterisk, however, I only took a single glance before I dropped the journal on the ground. The second page of the Bardi Empire's battlefield contained even more infuriating news. San Antonio has declared war on the Foss Empire, Siwan Dukedom, and other countries. Both sides' night squadrons have already exchanged fire on the Siwan Dukedom's Yao Bear Plains. San Antonio has achieved a great victory. I had an icy expression as I flipped to the next page. This only made me more and more annoyed. The Swallow Federation demands that the Kasola Kingdom hand over the seal of the sea god that they stole. Marshal Ben emphasizes that if the Kasola Kingdom continues to remain silent, the Swallow Federation will consider waging war to take back their national treasure. New sea tribes and sea monsters have appeared on the Ottoman Empire's borders. Lady Storm's priests and priestesses have appeared on the battlefield. Organized sea giants have also joined the battle. The war between the Ottoman Empire and the Sea Tribe has escalated. The Heen Kingdom of the Elves has announced that it will become the San Heen Empire. Moon Elf Queen Afina has declared herself the new Elven Empress. She also demands that all other Elven kingdoms submit to her. 16 kingdoms of the Elves have declared their allegiance, and 23 kingdoms have declared war on the Elven Empire. The Elven Civil War has begun. Silly cat, don't tear. What am I supposed to see if you tear it? Boiling black mana began to boil on the silly cat's body. A screaming banshee shadow formed on the black cat's body. This was the first time I'd ever seen Harloise so angry. It was evident that she was truly angry. I wisely ignored Harloise, who was currently bristling with anger. From a certain standpoint, the re-establishment of the Gold Elf Empire would perhaps have new historical significance for ordinary elves. However, for a Gold Elf descendant like Harloise, This would be nothing more than a traitor wearing the crown that originally belonged to her. This was a deep-seated hatred that she would never forgive. As I continued reading, I found many similar news articles. Some of them didn't seem very interesting, but if I really thought about them, they would be quite troublesome. Traces of gigantic insectoids have been discovered in the North Sea. These insectoids have incredibly high combat strength and are naturally resistant to magic. They are suspected to be an immemorial species. A large number of ogres have appeared in the San Anton Empire's Ocephalon region. There are many subspecies of ogres in the snowy plains, mountain cliffs, and forests. The San Anton Empire's government is warning all nearby residents to be on high alert. They'll be organizing a crusade soon. So many troublesome things happened at the same time. This seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually a type of necessity. Now that the Holy War had begun, the ambitions that had been suppressed for thousands of years were finally unrestrained. Now that the winter had passed, it was time for the long-prepared plans to begin in spring. The ambitious individuals who had been prepared for this for a long time finally extended their tentacles, and the world of He was now filled with many things. I closed this magazine and glanced at the silly cat, who was still fuming with anger for no reason. Her ethereal shadow was constantly screaming while her physical body was glaring at the magazine. I shook my head. Some things seemed like I had let go of them, but they had always been in my heart. They were weaknesses that no one would be willing to touch. If anyone dared to touch the land in the Northlands, I would probably end up just like her. I would act like an injured beast, hide in a corner, and roar at everyone. As for Harloise, perhaps the scars in her heart that she didn't want to be opened up the most was the elven crown that had originally belonged to the gold elves. How many generations of inheritance and how many former gold elves' glory had finally fallen from her hands? The pain of losing her country, the pain of being betrayed by someone she trusted, the feeling of helplessness as she watched everything head towards Armageddon. Perhaps it was because we were both in the same boat and recalled the Mist Kingdom back in the day. Or perhaps it was because I simply didn't want to see anyone bully my pet, but I felt rather sad and displeased as I looked at this silent, ethereal shadow. That was why I made this promise. Relax. As long as I'm here, no matter who it is, they'll never be able to easily wear this crown that belongs to the gold elves. Chapter 412. Chaos Girl? What's that? After my usual information gathering, I actually found an interesting rumor, or rather a rumor. The general idea was that Empress Maria was the reincarnation of some powerful demon in the Chaos Abyss, which is why she was born with an incredibly high affinity for the Chaos Abyss and became the strongest demon warlock in the world. And as long as she successfully ruled over San Antonio, there would be a demon invasion, the world would be destroyed, and so on and so forth. No one would take such a rumor seriously. Even the peddlers on the street thought that it was a rumor spread by Prince Winston. After all, there have been far too many rumors about Maria being a demon's daughter and a demon conspirator in the past few years. But someone just happened to believe it. Pope Coloma the First believed it. I, the most devout priest of the Holy Light, Pope Coloma the First, declare that Maria is Soline, the enemy of the Holy Light. Solane is the enemy of the Holy Light. All believers of the Holy Light must purify this filthy woman. The next day, early in the morning, such notices were posted everywhere in San Antonio's capital city. Isn't this way too unsightly? I felt rather helpless. Wasn't it already noisy enough for them to do such a thing at a time like this? San Antonio had the word holy in front of its name, which was a clear indication of its religious orientation. Most of its citizens believed in the Holy Light. Using divine authority to suppress royal authority was indeed a good idea. Having the Pope declare Maria a heretic would deprive Maria of her royal authority. This would be an excellent move in a political battle, but there was still a war going on. Weren't they worried that she would actually join the Chaos Abyss out of anger? Even if she was going to kill the donkey after it left the millstone, she should at least wait until she was done grinding the rice. She still controlled half of San Antonio, yet you didn't follow the rules at all. Demons wouldn't accept human surrender, but Maria was a demon warlock, a mage with demon blood flowing in her. She could completely transform into a demon through a demonization ritual, which would be completely impossible to deal with. If things really reached that point, and the rumors became true, that was probably what Pope Coloma and Winston were hoping for. I, the diviner of pure holy light, Estrada's successor, the strongest holy light knight in the world, Roland. Hayes declare Maria. Soline, a devout believer of the holy light. So, at noon that day, I flew into the sky shamelessly. While cosplaying as an artificial sun, I roared at the audience. The Southern sect's belief in the pure holy light was already widespread in this world. San Antonio didn't lack believers. I then wrote a letter to the Southern sect. I estimated that they would send Maria's holy title in a few days. Between the two sects, one accusing someone of heresy and the other praising someone as a pious saint, it had become a conflict of beliefs between the two religious branches. When I landed, Pope Coloma looked at me as if he wanted to eat me alive. However, I shrugged, indicating that it had nothing to do with me. Saint, Pope, Pope, Holy Pope, I, Maria, Pope said. It was quite amusing to see the old Pope glaring and blowing his nose in anger. I replied sincerely. I've also received reliable information. Queen Maria is indeed a devout believer of the holy light. I swear by the holy light. My pure holy light proved that I wasn't lying. According to my private information sources, this demon warlock was indeed an incredibly strange believer of the holy light. He wouldn't have come up with such an excuse if he didn't want to go against the Holy Church. Pope Coloma was so angry that he wanted to fight me to the death. However, his cardinal stopped him, probably because he was worried that he wouldn't be able to defeat me. Actually, I wasn't really afraid of a powerful holy light user. As one of the strongest holy light users in the world, I wouldn't be afraid of most holy light divine arts. If worst came to worst, I could just turn around and run away if he used God's descent. No, perhaps this was a good opportunity. God's descent, Pope Coloma. I really want to see the God of holy light's fourth incarnation. One was killed by ale, one was killed in another dimension, and one was blasted by a forbidden spell. You must have used up a lot of divine power. Pope Coloma was so angry that he almost had a brain hemorrhage when he saw me blaspheme a god. In the end, Pope Coloma, who would get so angry that he would start stuttering and wheezing whenever he saw me, went to the front lines as planned. I was happy to have some peace of mind. Meanwhile, I had originally thought that Prince Winston would kick me out if I talked about Maria. However, he actually treated me even more kindly and even invited me to talk privately with him many times. Don't misunderstand. I really wasn't the one who spread those rumors. That lord acting on his own gives me quite a headache as well. As a soldier, I still have common sense. If I start another civil war at this time, I'll become the entire country's greatest sinner. He spoke quite sincerely, but it was fine to just listen to politicians. I had seen many more ridiculous and foolish decisions for the sake of power and benefits. Your Highness, I'm telling the truth. No matter who spread such rumors and even caused that lord to declare Maria a heretic, not only is he trying to take Maria's life, he's even trying to shake the foundations of all of San Antonio. It seemed that even Pope Coloma noticed my overly perfunctory expression. I hurriedly nodded. Yes, I understand. I believe you. Your expression shows that you don't believe me at all. I'm really telling the truth. Even if there's a civil war, it should wait until the holy war is over. Yep, the truth. Pope Coloma was so depressed that he wanted to cry, but I was inwardly praising his excellent acting skills. His expression and attitude were so perfect that I almost believed him. How much was the difference? The difference was probably more than 300 years. The 14-year-old me would definitely have believed him. I didn't intend to stay in the capital city for long. I finished comparing the geographical information from the royal palace and confirmed the most likely locations for the ruins. I then immediately said goodbye to Pope Coloma. My only regret was that I would have to put the matter of the Allied army on hold. Judging from San Antonio's current situation, they couldn't even take care of their own matters, so there was no time to worry about anything else. But before I left, I unexpectedly received a thank you letter and an invitation from Maria. She probably wanted me to visit her and thank me for my assistance. Of course, I wouldn't refuse such an invitation since I could establish a relationship with one of San Antonio's true authorities. Even if I had to take a roundabout route, I would still go. Especially now, when San Antonio was still the #1 food storage country in all of Ike, while the Mist Alliance behind me was the #1 military weapons supplier in all of Ike. As long as we worked together, it would naturally be a great deal. What? Why didn't she try to sell them to Winston? Winston had a kingdom knight, the Holy Church's assistants, as well as Pope Coloma and Cardinal Rosario's personal assistants. Why would he possibly use our weapons and equipment? It could be said that the moment that the Holy Church declared Maria to be a heretic, the enemy of an enemy, had the potential to become a friend. She thus became our natural ally. But as I traveled to San Antonio, I noticed that something was off. The rumors about the Abyssal Girls have spread too quickly and too widely. Chapter 4:13. From a certain standpoint, my duel with conservation was a typical mage style. Careful observation, probing attacks that didn't aim for success, but only to avoid making mistakes. Careful observation of conservation's weaknesses, defending against conservation's probing attacks, and so on. Of course, there was also the sudden final attack that was more than enough to take conservation's life. That was why a duel between two mages would usually be quite boring. Mages would first summon cannon fodder and cast defensive spells to make sure that they were undefeatable. Only then would they begin casting spells to probe their opponent's strength. They would either destroy the enemy's cannon fodder or try to remove the enemy's defenses. The first to expose one's own weakness would be the loser. In that case, if it wasn't for the fact that there was a tremendous difference in power level, it was quite possible that a duel between two academic mages would last for 2 or 3 hours. Since most of the mages' attention was focused on defense and personal safety, the duel wouldn't be very interesting. But even though this was a normal mage duel, my duel with conservation was slightly different. The snow-white ice castle walls suffered repeated attacks. Even the vanguard of the undead mysteriously transformed into ice sculptures. However, the remaining undead didn't retreat. That was because undead creatures lacked fear to begin with. They didn't care about morale at all. The will of the undead lords was above all else. Charge! Step on your own kind. The undead army's inexplicable will converged into a will that was almost corporeal. It was as if there was an invisible skeleton lord howling in the void. The high-level undead knight climbed up his subordinate's corpse and was the first to reach the top of the castle walls. But before he could rejoice at his success, the next instant, a chill attacked him from under his feet, transforming him into an ice sculpture. But the next instant, his undead knight acolyte stepped on his corpse and also transformed into an ice sculpture. Then, another skeleton general continued to step on her corpse, even though this was a bottomless abyss that silently devoured everything. The black undead army continued to advance unwaveringly, as if they were man-eating ants that nobody dared to stop. If it's a river, fill it up. If it's a volcano, extinguish it. Although it seems quite foolish, it's indeed a practical method. After all, magic also requires energy as a source of energy, and energy will eventually run out. That's the most basic law of magic. Since it was a spell that required physical contact to be effective, then I would just use corpses to isolate it. If it was a spell that could spread, then I would use cannon fodder to consume all of the curse and negative energy. If it was a spell that was limited by its functions and rules, then I would use cannon fodder to test out all the rules. This was the foundational reason why the undead army could sweep through all countries. No matter how powerful or defensive magic was, or how powerful your offensive magic was, as long as you had enough cannon fodder, even the most powerful spell would have a limit. Even the most powerful spell would be exhausted to death. The Black Flood always moved forward slowly. It seemed slow and sluggish, as if it could escape with just a few steps. However, it was impossible to stop it. No matter where it escaped to, the result would be the same. This was the undead calamity, the king of pestilence, that everyone viewed as death itself. But in this battle between undead emperors, this was nothing more than an appetizer. She had as many cannon fodder as she wanted. Of course, I had my own way of dealing with conservation. But before that, I needed to deal with conservation's magical attacks first. Conservation had finished casting her spell. A pitch-black cloud flew over from the distance, but it instantly shattered into pieces when it got close. The cloud instantly enveloped all of Cloud City, filling the entire city with a dense black mist. The dark clouds in front of him weren't offensive spells. Instead, they were a layer of pitch-black fog in which countless dark elves were circling and fantasizing. They couldn't tell up from down, down from left, and a lack of a sense of direction and vision made all attacks a joke. A special magic. Yep, I've probably never seen this before in a mortal plane. It's probably a special application of negative energy. It's even capable of blocking out soul vision. This mist has the scent of souls. It's probably a sacrificial divine art that uses undead subordinates as sacrificial sacrifices. Using soul shards to block out soul vision? That's quite a creative idea. I nodded in agreement. My inference was pretty much the same. Having an encyclopedia was great. Many inferences could be instantly verified. In that case, since I knew the general principles behind this spell, I should be able to find a way to counter it. Purify, no absorb. Using a soul magic in front of a soul magic master? What a joke. Under my command, the national-level soul summoning tower in the center of Yongya City was fully activated. The soul shards in the mist weren't even able to resist as they were directly absorbed by the soul summoning tower. The mist of death that blocked vision actually became the Cloud Summoning Tower's new energy source. The Cloud Summoning Tower's energy had dropped from 90% to 92%. Even though I had the upper hand, I couldn't help but feel anxious. I'm afraid that she's already prepared her next spell. This was the difference in tempo between mages. An undead emperor with an undead army was also capable of casting spells. It was basically the equivalent of me taking one step for every 2 steps she took. A novice would probably be delighted at being able to nullify the enemy's attack, while I would have a headache because I had lost the initiative. I knew that once the tempo was pulled away and the advantage accumulated to the point where I couldn't handle it anymore, that would be the critical moment to decide the victor. The difference between us was obvious from the very start. Her undead army's movements were also a threat to me. She had plenty of cannon fodder to use right from the start, while I could only deal with her every move. The further I went, the more difficult it would be to deal with her. This meant that I would have to simultaneously deal with 2 of her moves for every step I took. As I expected, where did this big guy come from? Right after the black mist dissipated, I saw a gigantic bone giant that had already stepped over my ice wall. This bone giant had originally been heading in our direction, but when he noticed that the mist surrounding the Cloud City was beginning to dissipate, he unhesitatingly gave up on attacking the city before him and immediately changed directions to break through this abnormal world. Bone giants weren't a rare type of undead soldier. Both an innate giant's body and an acquired giant's bone structure could create such a killing machine. High-level undead mages would usually create such undead creatures to attack cities. After all, bone giants were both conspicuous and slow. Not only would they easily attract troublesome opponents, they would also consume a tremendous amount of energy. It wouldn't be worth it to use them against small targets. No, this isn't an ordinary bone giant. But compared to his slow companions, this silver-gray giant was very agile. The frequency at which his feet moved was so fast that it created intermittent seismic waves. His eyes were not flickering with the soul fire of the undead, but with a sapphire-embedded magic diamond probe. His other eye was also emitting a red light that looked like an infrared ray. He wasn't wielding a giant sword or battle axe or any other cold weapon. Instead, he was wielding a spear that was currently emitting scorching flames. I could even see the traces of screws and welded plates at the critical points of the spear. His body was also covered in steel armor, and on his feet, I could even see support wheels and a flamethrower. Undead Gundam. Did I come to the wrong theater? Is this the new species that the dragon Lich mentioned? I could faintly sense that this bone giant's body contained many independent souls. This bone giant was actually nothing more than a vehicle. The pilot's cabin seemed to be located in his abdomen. This was obviously no ordinary undead magic. At the very least, an undead emperor who had been hiding in the undead planes for so many years wouldn't be able to create such a combination of magic and engineering. My first impression of this bone giant was quite terrible. Not only was it powerful, but its appearance meant that the most troublesome situation was about to occur. The undead had either obtained the Haletum Plains inheritance, or they had allied with the owner of the inheritance. Our enemy was no longer just an undead emperor. Perhaps it was because Yongya City had far too much energy, or perhaps it was because the higher-ups had given an absolute order. But this bone giant, which was obviously our ace, didn't intend to fight to the death against Yongya City. It passed through the ice wall and simply continued forward, attempting to break through our defenses. Tim Ladd will probably like such a gift. Of course, that's only if you can accept it in its entirety. Of course, any ordinary powerful individual would have been scared half to death by this. But in the eyes of experienced individuals like us, this bone giant was nothing more than a toy. Not only that, it was an unimportant toy with a failed design. Tactical magic, stone to mud. This spell smashed into the bone giant, instantly transforming the flat ground into a swamp. There was even more swamp beneath the swamp. It was too late for the bone giant to stop in time, so it suddenly jumped up, flames spitting out from its feet. It charged, exploded, and swung its leg with great force. This was a standard long jump, and then it somersaulted in midair before landing in a crater. Nice movement, but it didn't jump up at all. Of course, bone giants don't have any muscles. It's already the limit for them to use magic to walk. They're only mimicking human movements because they're instincts. Does they really intend to do a long jump? Do they really think that this bone giant is some unscientific red jipper that can increase its speed by 3 times just by being painted? However, I didn't celebrate too early. High-energy signals in the distance indicated that conservation had prepared yet another new spell. Some of the undead below were already breaking through the ice wall. It would seem that our tempo had fallen behind. Undead were crawling all over the ice wall. Conservation's willingness to sacrifice herself was truly moving. And so, I unhesitatingly created another ice wall, learning from her lesson. This time, I made it 2 meters taller and 3 meters wider than the first one. Keep going. Let's see how much cannon fodder you have. Although I sounded quite arrogant, I was actually rather unconfident. Ice walls like this that contained ice energy would consume far too much energy. Each time I used it, it would use up almost 10% of Yongya City's total energy. In order to ensure Yongya City's safety and combat strength, I didn't dare to use less than 50% of my energy. I wouldn't be able to use such an ice wall to stall for time many times. The most annoying thing was that he couldn't allow his opponent to maintain the initiative. He had to deal with every move that came his way. The situation would only become more and more disadvantageous. We would need time to counterattack. I'm going to the secondary tower. Leave the magical battle against conservation to me. You go and clear out the cannon fodder first. For once, Harloise was being diligent as she volunteered to take on this heavy responsibility. Her strategic decision was obviously correct. Since conservation was too far away and it was impossible to eliminate her, it would indeed be a good idea to use the strategy of Tianji's horse race to suppress conservation's weak points and eliminate the annoying cannon fodder first. She's an undead emperor. We should at least be careful. Even with the mage tower support, it would still be quite difficult for me to directly face off against an undead emperor. Invisible curses, dimensional sealing spells, and special negative energy permanent damage would all be enough to kill Harloise. However, Harloise chuckled as she slowly transformed into her human form. Her silky blonde hair reached the ground, and her familiar, beautiful face appeared in front of me. Her breath smelled like orchids as she intentionally whispered into my ear. Undead Emperor? Who do you think I am? Who taught you undead magic? I'm the woman who taught you how to become an undead emperor. Now that I've accumulated enough, I'm also the woman who's about to become an undead emperor. Be careful of her. I'm hoping to obtain a chance to make a breakthrough in battle. Harloise transformed into a phantom as she giggled. I can now focus on the undead army below me. It was indeed quite reassuring to have such a trustworthy helper. What should I prepare next? It would be best if I can use a powerful spell that can kill off all the mid-level and high-level undead in one go. Since I have the Mage Tower's energy reserves, I might as well use up a bit of it.